Good evening, everybody. Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public. Good evening, all those watching on our YouTube channel. Welcome to this meeting of Derbyshire Dales District Council Planning Committee, held here in Matlock Town Hall on Thursday, 12th December 2024. Firstly, apologies for the temperature in it here. I don't quite know what's happened, but we're going to leave the doors open, try and let some fresh air in. First of all, by way of introductions, my name is Councillor Peter O'Brien. I'm the District Council for the Hathersage area in the district. I'm chairing this evening's meeting. On my right is my colleague, Councillor Sue Barefoot. We then have Sean Robson, who is our Development Manager, Miles Joyce, our Principal Planning Officer. We have Christy Lim, who is our Principal Solicitor. And we have Lucy Howson on my far left, who is our Democratic Services Team Leader. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening, so if the alarm does go off, the fire exit is in the door, double door, which you came through to get in here. There's an additional fire exit to my left through here. There are refreshments in the corridor outside, so if you do feel the need for a glass of fresh water, cold water, that's available. Also coffee, chocolate. There's apparently no tea this evening. Probably a blessing in disguise having tasted it. The meetings are recorded on our internal television channel there. If you prefer not to be seen on the telly, please just, if you're speaking that is, please just wave at one of us up here and we'll make sure the telly channel is turned off while you're speaking. So moving on to our agenda this evening, item number 1 is apologies for absence. Lucy, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Archer, Butcher, Buttle, Murphy and Peacock, and here as substitute are Councillors Maelstrom and Shelley.
Thank you, Lucy. Item 2, interests. Would any members like to declare any interests of the 2 items on the agenda this evening? No, that's fine. Right, we're now going to move on to consider the 2 planning applications that we have before us. By way of introduction, starting off with the application in Brailsford, I do want to apologise on behalf of the council for the administrative error that was made in inviting the parish council and residents to attend a site meeting on the day before the committee, which was in fact yesterday, but the letter that was originally sent out suggested the meeting was actually held on Monday. That's because we don't normally have planning committees on 2 days a week. It's normally always held on the Tuesday, but we split them up here. And inadvertently, we sent out an incorrect letter of invitation to the site meeting. That was corrected the following day, but as I said, apologies for anyone who arrived at Throstle Nest yesterday. We're looking into how that had happened. I said it was an administrative error, but apologies all the same. I will, in the circumstances, allow the parish council representatives to speak for more than the normal 3 minutes if they want to make any additional points which they may have made at the site visit.
Chair, can I just interject for one moment, Chair, that you've made that statement, which is most useful, but most of the people in that room next door that are here for that application, so they won't be aware of what you've just said.
No, David, I'll make the same statement when we come to discuss the detail. Just before we move on to the applications, our development manager would like just to make mention of the government announcement today regarding planning on the National Planning Policy Framework. Apart from some changes to the announced changes to the regulations, you may have also seen that the numbers of new housing per annum which Derbyshire Dales is now required to give consent for has risen from 216 to 580. So that gives you some context to the challenges which the council is going to face over the next few years. Sean Robson, you wanted to say something about the new NPPF.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you. Just to make members of the public and elected members aware that the NPPF did arrive today. Both myself and the team leader, Miles, have been through the NPPF as it's actually now worded. There are a number of changes in there, but the primary elements in there, specifically the tilted balance policy, paragraph 11D still remains. And as Councillor O'Brien has mentioned, the housing numbers have been lifted. And it just so members are aware of the fact that any reference to that within the plans or within the actual the reports as drafted will be tweaked subject to what that recommendation is moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Right, our first application this evening is at land of Throstle Nest Way in Brailsford. This is an outline planning application for up to 70 new dwelling houses. The only aspect of the application which is not being reserved for future consideration is the access. Approval for the access is being sought at the same time as the outline application. And our first speaker this evening is Simon Thompson from the Parish Council.
Yes, but I'm quite happy to open, but I thought there was a different...
Well, my order says you're first, then Pat. Yes, please. We normally have the Parish Council first, because that sets the context for the...
Can I suggest the chairman of the Parish Council goes first?
By all means. Pat Loughlin, would you like to come up to speak? As I said, feel free to. You've got 3 or 4 minutes to address us.
Well, good evening. As the chairman has said, I'm Pat Loughlin, chairman of the Parish Council. We represent the residents of the parish, and we're here tonight clearly because this does not go well with the residents of our parish. Brailsford, as those who know it, was a small linear developed village along the A52. And it's in a rural setting, and by definition it has no local employment. But our village has been under siege for the last 7 years. 375 new homes, 250% increase on the number of houses registered at the time of the 2011 census, a massive development at the western, northern and now southern end of the village, which means there's effectively a new village. But unfortunately, there isn't the infrastructure and community facility investment to go with that village. So most of the people who come to Brailsford come for the quality of life, but they drive to work. And therefore, what was once a thriving village community is now effectively a dormer settlement. And we think that this village has been overdeveloped. By that number of houses, 250%. And we're not alone in thinking that. And I think external speakers will come to that point tonight as well. We have a parish plan, a neighbourhood plan. We have a neighbourhood plan that was developed by the residents and prepared by us. It was based on the settlement boundary that the district council set in the current local plan. The Gladman site, the application site, is outside that development boundary. It's also on land which is deemed unsuitable in the 2022 SHLA by the district council's commission expert or consultant. So therefore, it looks unreasonable that this application has even come to the table because it shouldn't be there. And the application is much more of the same. All the houses that we've had have been the bigger size houses and do not address the needs of the village as I've set out in our neighbourhood plan. That covers the vision of our residents for the future of our village, and it is being totally disregarded. And in this plan, there is no investment in those facilities and services, particularly community facilities, and in the drainage and surface water management and sewage, all the things that go with lots of new houses. There is no concession to those investments, and the planning officer and no one has asked about there being that type of investment. And because this is happening, people think the democratic process is being undermined. What is the point in having a policy if it's simply not adhered to? And the developer can walk through and say, this is on the outskirts of the development boundary, so it will be fine. Now, we all know that we need new houses, but should they be in our village, they should be in the right location, with the right work, and with the right support and facilities. And that's what we'd like you to consider tonight. This is not the right location. It just puts more cars on the road, more pollution, more people moving out of the village, more pressure on the existing services. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's suitable for the future of the Derbyshire Dales and the countryside that we all respect and love. It could be scared. This is NIMBYism, but it's common sense, really. Don't build where people have to travel to get what they need. So we're asking you not to just tick the boxes with the numbers. We've heard tonight that there's numbers, the numbers are increasing. Don't just tick the boxes with the numbers. Look at the detail of this application. It's placed minimal concessions to standards. It doesn't address some of the renewable energy challenges that we'd all like to see addressed. The access, we see it there, is very poor. It goes past these people's houses on a very narrow road. It's going to put at least another 150 car movements on that road through an estate and onto a lane which is already covered off with the developments from the west, because everything converges on that lane and at the junction of Luke Lane, as it's called, with the A52. That junction is effectively now at capacity, and there are already queues of traffic trying to turn. And what makes it worse is that it's a route heavily used by HGVs going to our local employment, which is the local quarries. And the primary school is also on that road. And to get to the primary school, these people, children from this new estate, will have to cross that road. And there's no crossing. So please, don't just tick the boxes. Just think about what's happening in Brailsford and think about how we can make it so much better, how we should have the investment, how the developer should be asked to make the investment that's needed. If this has to come, that the investment comes with it, and see whether that still provides the profit that they want, because I suspect that it won't, and they won't be interested. So I'm asking you, please put people before profit and save our village from more development. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I'm sure many of the points that you've raised will be brought out in the debate later. Second speaker, also from the parish council, is Mr. Simon Thompson. Simon, if you could try and get through in 3 or 4 minutes, please.
Absolutely. Firstly, good evening, and thank you for hosting this evening. This site, as you know, is Grade 2 productive land, agricultural land. It's also 10 metres above the surrounding existing village and will be clearly seen for miles. Without future substantial hardwood plantings around this development, this site will remain a major blot on the surrounding landscape from every direction. Planting a few fast-growing, short-lived trees, as has been the case in the past developments, will not repair either the environmental or the visual damage. This needs a surrounding shelter belt of at least 50 metres. And if this goes through, will you require such a shelter belt? And that shelter belt must be hardwood. I do know a little bit about this. I'm a farmer. And I know that planting short-lived trees lasts for 30 years and it's gone. And that is what we've seen with all the other developments around the village. No long-term planning, no long-term thinking about the environment. G12 countries all agree that domestic food production is now of strategic importance of each country. Both climate change, pandemic, India and Indonesia, by the way, banned rice exports during the whole of COVID. Putin has militarized food, and this really does explain why countries now see food production as strategically important. Large swathes of central Italy and Spain are on the verge of no longer being able to be farmed. Luckily enough, we get some rain in this country. This government claims to recognise this priority. Remember, this is again grade 2 productive farmland. Carbon capture. Derbyshire Wildlife is an example of a department that is doubling its headcount to 12 in response to the number of farms being purchased by corporates to carbon offset corporate jets, commercial airlines, chemicals, or whatever. Across the country, prime agricultural is being brought up on a massive scale for this purpose. And then we have the acreage of productive agricultural land that has been taken up for development. Well, you would say, so what? For each development is only a small amount of acreage. But these are greenfield developments that are being utilised. And across the whole country, it is huge. Combine this with carbon capture, and the numbers are really quite frightening. The government today again stressed the priority must be given to grey and brown field over green. They recognise that there has to be a trade-off there has to be a priority for the environment and for the countryside for a number of reasons. But, as we all know, that it is the greenfield sites that are by far the most lucrative and profitable areas for development. They also focused on the vital importance of the protecting nature of the environment for residents. Mental health, as we know in this country, is a growing and major problem. Open space farmland is critical for mental health, also for the young and the elderly, and without having to cross busy main roads or busy roads, full stop. Clearly, the responsibility of protecting domestic food production lies at all levels of government, as of course is the provision of housing. But in the Dales, there are choices. Those I'm sure you're all familiar with, and everybody else is as well. But profit margins on grey and brown field will never be as great as green field. Concreting over agricultural land, if planning departments continue to offer this option, will obviously be the route to maximise profits. You will hear this evening of the impact of the increasing incidence of extreme rainfall events on agricultural land and the runoff effect on tarmac. These are all factors that have to be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. We've now got a number of local residents coming to address committee. First on my list is Carl Newby. Carl, if you could try to keep to 3 minutes, we'd be grateful, please.
My name is Carl Newby and I'm presenting on behalf of Michael Cannon, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation, who has been involved with road design and construction for over 40 years. We have been asked by the residents of Throstle Nest Way to object to this application on their behalf. Throstle Nest Way is only 5.5 metres wide, which does not comply with legislation for the traffic associated with this application. The width of the road required for delivery vans, buses and above all HGVs is clearly laid out at 6.75 metres, which is 1 metre more than the current road. The 15 houses on Throstle Nest Way are inhabited by 11 retirees, 4 families with young children and 1 single person. All will be severely impacted by the construction traffic and ultimately by approximately 140 vehicles stopping and starting at a junction twice a day. The construction of 70 houses will require the following: 15,000 tonnes of earth and green waste moved for footings and hard surfaces. 7,000 tonnes will have to leave site. Import of 1.3 million bricks, 5,000 cubic metres of concrete and 20,000 tonnes of asphalt and aggregate. This alone requires a total of approximately 5,000 HGV journeys on a road so narrow that 2 lorries cannot pass together, without considering the likelihood of parked vehicles on the road as well. Using a very quiet Throstle Nest Way cul-de-sac as access for this construction site is unthinkable. It will create excessive dust and dirt, dangerous nitrous oxide exhaust fumes, vast amounts of CO2 and noise pollution from heavy earth movers and construction traffic. Breathing exhaust fumes, the worry of accidents, noise and proximity of HGVs on this road will cause fear and anxiety, exacerbate asthma, creating a risk to both the physical and mental health of all residents. The traffic congestion will escalate on Lute Lane. As stated by Highways Access Solutions in their report, quote, "If future developments are approved on the A52 Lute Lane junction, it will fail to operate. Particularly around the peak morning hour, there will be unacceptable delays and potentially dangerous traffic manoeuvres, resulting in unacceptable risks to pedestrians. A secondary concern will be the performance and risks at the junction at evening peak time. Furthermore, the impact of other recent approved housing developments has not been considered by DDDC Planning Department. As such, the traffic and highways assessment for this development underestimate the cumulative impact of increased levels of congestion in Brailsford. A cumulative impact assessment should have been completed. For the above reasons, we object to this application." Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Julie Coxon, please. Julie, again, 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. My name is Julie Coxon and I'm a resident of Throstle Nest Way and have been for over 30 years. I've been nominated to speak on behalf of the residents of Throstle Nest Way. The access point from Throstle Nest Way into the site is wholly unsuitable. Throstle Nest Way is a narrow residential cul-de-sac of only 5.5 metres wide. The proposed access point is unsuitable due to its elevation and proximity to existing properties. It has a very steep gradient of 7.7%. This measurement is only just below the maximum allowed of 8% as stated in Gladman's outline application. The application proposes to bring the access road around the steepest part of the hill, which will be particularly dangerous during adverse weather conditions as roadside roads are not gritted. The application does not state how the site access is to be constructed and what impact it will have on the existing properties and residents. Throstle Nest Way has 15 homes. Many are inhabited by retired people because the cul-de-sac offers a safe environment. Many residents are elderly and require higher than average visits from NHS healthcare and emergency vehicle services. The addition of 130 plus vehicles using this route will have a significant impact on people's lives, create traffic congestion and delays for NHS services. Throstle Nest Way provides the safest pedestrian access to the A52 for school children, the elderly, wheelchair and pushchair users who find navigating the narrow pavements alongside the A52 almost impossible due to overgrown hedgerows, dangerous proximity to vehicles and speeding traffic, especially during rush hour and adverse weather conditions. The proposed site and access will adversely impact existing properties on Throstle Nest Way due to the volume of construction and residential traffic. The proposed access will impact on the residents of Throstle Nest Way and the plane between the junction with Throstle Nest Way and Luke Lane, as well as residents and existing commuters of the already overburdened Luke Lane. This development will have an overwhelmingly negative impact on the quality of life of the elderly residents who currently enjoy a quiet, safe, peaceful location. This situation is causing a great deal of anxiety amongst residents who are feeling extremely worried and depressed. This is having a major impact on their mental health and well-being. Moving house is not an option for most residents due to their age and infirmity. The access will require the removal of an ancient hedgerow home to a variety of wildlife, including bats, hedgehogs, birds and reptiles. We are afraid that this application is the tip of an iceberg, and if granted could open the door to further housing development on this site using the access from Throstle Nest Way. For the above reasons, we object to this development.
Thank you, Julie. Paul Sharp.
I believe Mr Whitby needs to speak because he has a subsequent engagement.
Welcome to John Whitby, our Member of Parliament. John, welcome. I think this is your first visit to
It is.
our Planning Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair.
You also, if you can try and keep to 3 to 4 minutes.
I'll be quick. Thank you. Yes, it does seem a bit ironic that on the day that the government produces a statement on housing targets, I'm here opposing a development. And of course, we do need housing. There's no doubt about that, but not at any price. The reason why I'm happy to oppose this application is that it's one of those developments that keeps coming back because it keeps getting rejected. It was rejected in the 90s, it was rejected in 2016, and again in 2022. If a development keeps getting rejected, there's probably a very, very good reason why. It sits outside the current approved development boundary. What's the point of agreeing a boundary if it's going to be ignored? The point of having a boundary is to prevent sprawl, but it's fair to say that Brailsford has already suffered from this to some extent. It's doubled in size in the last couple of decades. If this development goes ahead, visually it will dominate the village. The land is around 4 metres higher than just Throstle Nest Way. The access along Throstle Nest Way, as we've just heard, of course it's a cul-de-sac. It seems woefully inadequate for the thousands of large construction vehicles to be going up and down it on a constant basis, and especially with the on-street parking that's there anyway on a quiet weekend day. You do wonder how this is going to play out in reality. The site is sitting on top of an aquifer. I'm not exactly sure what the consequences of that could be. I'm just putting it out there. It's going to be an interesting conversation for potential buyers when their land searches come back. But I suppose my main issue with the additional with this development is the additional flood risk. There's already a regular stream from this site that flows down Alley Walk, which is an adopted road, and that's just following sort of moderate rainfall. And unfortunately, the position we're in climate-wise is it's only going to get worse. We're going to get more rainfall. If this development goes ahead, the runoff from the site will only increase the stream to something much more serious, and this will undoubtedly end up causing problems on the main A52 through the village, and no doubt houses and businesses along that stretch. Another concern for me is that, and going back to the, when I started the statement today, which I've not had a chance to read yet, but I imagine it's going to follow the government's manifesto commitments on social and affordable housing. So this site is, my understanding is that the latest iteration is there's going to be about 11% affordable housing because the developer does what all developers try and do is just pay off the authority with whatever social S106 or however they do it. So 11% is obviously woefully, significantly lower than what the government is going to want, and the manifesto commitment was 50% on greenfield, greyfield, whatever you want to call this land. So clearly that is massively missing the mark. So for me, I'd just like to ask, we don't need to build everywhere. We need to build houses, but like I said, not in the wrong places. And I'm pretty convinced this is the wrong place. So please don't be afraid to reject this application once again. And please don't be afraid to defend that decision if they appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for taking the time and trouble to come up to Matlock this evening. Paul Sharp.
I'm a resident of Brailsford, and I've been asked by the residents to object to this application and speak on flooding, and some photo and video evidence has already been submitted to planning. Flooding continues to be a worsening problem, with no major upgrade work to the main sewers, certainly in the last 40 years, and even back to the 1960s, despite the enormous profits that developers have made out of our village. The massive overdevelopment of the village since 2017 has greatly exacerbated the problem of flooding. An email from the Environment Agency shows a confirmation by Severn Trent that the lower Culverton stream is indeed contaminated by raw sewage, which floods into the gardens of the garage and neighbouring cottages. And yet in section 8.8 of the flood assessment, it is stated that Severn Trent have approved foul connection to the sewers. Why, when the treatment plant is already beyond its capacity and regularly having to ship tankers of sewage out? The proposed development is elevated high above all the neighbouring properties and the A52, but the cottages on the south side of the A52 sit below the road level. All floodwater always drains downwards, flooding gardens with foul water and sewage. The site currently is free draining agricultural land, but if this land comes to be hard surfaced, all the water will be diverted into the already overburdened drains and worse, the open water courses. These already overflow onto the A52 and private properties, which makes a bad situation even worse. Gladman's flood assessment has been shown to be incorrect. It completely omits a culvert at the proposed site, which causes flooding, and a huge volume of water which enters the A52 drains. None of this has been accounted for in the assessment, giving an inaccurate picture of the drainage capability. The culvert is the termination of Throstle Nest stream, flooding onto the hard surface of Alley Walk and down to the A52. The stream higher up is overburdened because the Cameron Homes development at the top of the village diverts its surface water into the stream to avoid investing in the village's drainage. The assessment also omits a pressured water main running from the underground reservoir, which then runs beneath private properties on Alley Walk, and the consequences of disturbing this main and the reservoir itself will be catastrophic. Gladman proposed to create an attenuation pond rather than upgrading the existing drainage system. The pond will sit around 3 metres higher than neighbouring properties on Saracen's Court, causing seepage from the rising water table. Personally, I'd be terrified by the risk of having that pond elevated above my property. This development will have a hugely damaging impact on the mental well-being and quality of life of the community, and particularly the people living immediately beside it. Ordinary people who have worked their whole lives for a home in a quiet rural setting. This application only exists because of a gap in the 5-year supply. But why should Brailsford residents yet again have to bear that burden? So we look to this committee for a decision which represents the ordinary people of Brailsford rather than the wealthy developers and landowners. And for all these reasons, I object to this application.
Thank you, Paul. Roger Wilkinson. Thank you, Roger.
Good evening. My name is Roger Wilkinson. I'm a resident of Brailsford, and I've been asked by the residents of Brailsford to object to this application on their behalf, and raised their concerns about its impact on infrastructure. Brailsford's infrastructure and services have already been stretched to breaking point. The proposed development does not match the NPPF definition of sustainable. The character and community of the village is being totally eroded. Brailsford Primary School is already oversubscribed, evidenced by the fact that the current dining room is being used as a classroom. Recent planning approval for the land south of Main Road will potentially add a further 35 pupils. TNW application will increase this to 52 pupils over capacity, necessitating two additional classrooms. Governing bodies believe this will cost in the region of £900,000. Brailsford Medical Centre is already oversubscribed and struggling to accommodate existing residents, with waiting times for appointments being up to 1 week and considerably more. The cumulative impact of this and two most recent developments will lead to additional 334 patients. The Holland Medical Practice is currently is closed permanently, and its patient list has been transferred to Brailsford. Whilst the surgery is fit for purpose, national shortage of doctors is an issue, with the practice struggling to fill GP positions. The proposed site contains an underground reservoir and site of a former pumping house site, which has a deep, open shaft located on the current footpath, which presents a risk to residents. The A52 is of major concern. Traffic through the village is heavy, extremely heavy, and forecast to rise beyond capacity of the A52 with the development of the Ashbourne airfield. Congestion and hazardous driving conditions along the A52 are certain to increase. The Gladman's proposal for a cycle path is impractical. The A52 is dangerous for cyclists due to high volume of HGVs and commercial traffic. The public bus service is threatened due to public transport cutbacks, leading to a reduced hourly bus service from its current half-hourly service. Thank you for letting me talk, and for these above reasons, we object to this application.
Thank you again. Tom Craig. Thank you. 3 to 4 minutes, please, if you can.
Yeah, I'm Tom Craig. I'm a retired farm vet and been a resident of Brailsford for 47 years. And I'm here to sort of show the loss of valuable farmland with all the recent building things. Agricultural land around Brailsford has been slowly eroded by successful planning applications over the past 5 years. Brailsford has doubled in size with these applications. Whilst I'm not against the building of houses for the growing population, it is clear development should be prioritised brown and grey belt, not green belt sites. According to the Office of National Statistics, UK population increased by 460,000 between 2023 and 2024. More people equals more demand for food as well as housing. Domestic food production only accounts for 60% of our requirements. The remainder must be imported. If we continue to build on productive agricultural land, we will be more reliant on other countries with the risk of shortages as the threats of climate change, wars and geopolitics grow. Climate change is already impacting UK food production. Many fields were flooded last winter and spring, resulting in autumn-sown seeds and crops rotting in the ground and being washed away. We need all the productive agricultural land that is available. DEFRA figures show that a reduction of 400,000 hectares of agricultural land in use between 2022 and 2023. That is 1,544 square miles, not in agricultural use. There are many suitable brownfield sites available in Derbyshire Dales, including the Ashbourne airfield site approved for development, which is welcomed. There is also an unknown quantity of greyfield sites to be identified where poor quality land could be used for building instead of productive agricultural land being used. Agricultural land is not only vital for food production, but also for environmental protection of wildlife, pollinating insects, and importantly, to soak up rainwater, reducing the sudden runoff to the drains and sewers from the hard surfaces of road, pavements, roofs, after prolonged heavy downpours, helping to prevent flooding. I object to future planning in Brailsford because the loss of valuable farming land required to feed an expanding population. There are more suitable brownfields and greyfield sites for house building, including those nearer town centres where employment is needed and where car dependency and environmental impacts are less. And good agricultural land is required to feed our growing population and our future generations. Once it has been built on, it is gone forever. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. David Sandbrook, then, please.
Good evening. My name is David Sandbrook. I've been a resident of Brailsford for over 21 years. I'm a chartered planner and a chartered surveyor, so I'm familiar with the concept of tilted balance. It is recognised that the proposed development is not in accordance with the development plan or indeed with your emerging policies and proposals for the future development of Brailsford. However, your planning officer has concluded that your authority's failure to maintain a 5-year housing supply warrants a departure from the development plan and that the merits of this scheme outweigh demonstrable harm. Tilted balance does not mean an abdication of good planning or a disregard of the negative impacts of a development. You have heard the concerns of the residents of Brailsford, who fail to see how the access arrangements through Throstle Nest Way can be deemed acceptable. They're concerned about the pressure on local infrastructure, especially the school, and weary of the impact on the countryside and cumulative impact on our village. I am particularly concerned by the landscape and visual impact of the proposed development and consequential loss of amenity. If you climb from the A52 along the footpath running through this development, you reach the finest viewpoint in the village, some 25 metres above the A52, with views over the village and far-reaching views to the south towards Needwood Forest. This spot is the lungs of our village. This viewpoint would be lost if the development is permitted, but this appears not to be recognised by your planning officer, who slavishly accepts the applicant's consultant's view that despite the application site affording magnificent views, the development itself will not be seen. They have concluded that the landscape and visual effects would be limited and localised, a view supported by strategically taken photographs behind trees in full leaf. I would have expected the LVIA to include a zone of theoretical visibility, a common practice for such assessments, but I suspect its omission is deliberate in order to hide the true level of impact. Your own trees and landscape consultee has recommended that a landscape architect be consulted, but this recommendation has been ignored by the officers, who should be looking to protect, enhance and restore the landscape character of the area under your policy PD5 and resist development that would harm the local landscape or the setting of a settlement. The landscape and visual effects of this development have been watered down and accepted by your officer despite the concern of colleagues and a recommendation to seek independent assessment. In conclusion, the cumulative effects of this development on the village of Brailsford have been understated, and thus the planning assessment is flawed. I urge the committee to recognise the true impact of this development and refuse the application, or at the very least defer until an independent LVIA is able to inform your decision. Permitting this application risks ruining this village irrevocably. I urge you to refuse the application.
Thank you, David. Roger Palmer-Clark. Roger, 3 to 4 minutes if you can, please.
Yes, it should be less than that. Hopefully I won't be 3 minutes. I object to further development. I live on Sundal Walk, which is a small development of 25 or so houses on the corner of Loop Lane and the A52. It is my conservative assumption that 100 or more additional cars will need to use Throstle Nest Way for access onto Loop Lane via the Plain. Particularly at the peak traffic times, that's typically Monday to Friday between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, between 3:30 and 6:30 in the evening. The traffic turning off the A52 and pulling onto the A52 is already very heavy. The example I can give there is pulling out tonight. Could I get out? No, I had to wait 5 minutes because there was traffic queuing up Loop Lane. And eventually somebody let me out. But it's a long wait. So if there's more traffic on the road, there will be ever more frequently. There'll be standstills, traffic queues will lengthen, and the route will be blocked. It is bad enough now trying to get out of Sundal any time during the day, as traffic is usually at a standstill, queuing way back up to up Loop Lane, way beyond the junction with the Plain, which of course joins Throstle Nest Way. As a resident of the Sundal development, which is 25 yards from the A52 junction, my neighbours and I will be even less able to pull out onto Loop Lane. Similarly impacted will be the proposed additional vehicles from the new Barratt Gladman estate, which will have to queue along Throstle Nest Way and along the Plain to join the queue on Loop Lane. I can only hope no one on the new estate wants to turn right towards Ashbourne when they finally reach the junction. It will be a very long wait. I would like to make the point that the additional traffic will impact access both to and from the primary school further up Loop Lane, and it will affect access to the medical centre, which is just 50 yards away on Church Lane. Not for me, I may add, as if the traffic on the A52 is at a standstill, it will be easier for me to cross the road closer to home, as opposed to walking down the road to use the pedestrian crossing. The other point I want to make was about the bus stops. The bus stop is opposite the junction, outside the Methodist Church. I nearly said it's every hour, but it varies these days, which brings me to the point about current position of the bus stops. Is there any plan to improve their space or the sites to make access onto the A52 safer? Incidentally, I thank goodness I didn't buy the house I was interested in buying some years ago on Throstle Nest Way. The thought of 140 or so vehicles driving past my house at least twice a day is frightening, as the road itself is so narrow. Add to that the thought of the construction traffic using this road over the next couple of years and of delivering service vehicles accessing the new houses regularly for the foreseeable future. It's terrifying and very sad for the residents of Throstle Nest Way. There we go. That's all I need to say. Hopefully that's less than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Roger. And that concludes the Parish Council and the residents who've been speaking so eloquently against the application. We now have Helen Ball, who's the agent on behalf of the applicants, who's going to address committee. Please, if I could ask everyone to listen respectively to what Helen's got to tell us. You've got 5 minutes, Helen, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I will be speaking in favour of the proposal. Over the course of the last few months, we have been working collaboratively with the case officer and statutory consultees to ensure that the proposals before you can be delivered sustainably and offer a positive addition to the village. As outlined in the officer's report, there were no objections to the proposals from any of these consultees who have assessed matters such as technical deliverability, as well as considering local policy and overall principle of development. I just wanted to address one of the gentleman's points earlier about the fact that this proposal is not in line with the local plan. There is a policy within the plan, policy S4, that allows residential development on the edge of these villages where the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply. Whilst we know there are local concerns regarding the level of growth already seen within Brailsford over the last few years, it's imperative to remember that these homes, including those proposed within this application, are to provide local housing to address the backlog of need, as well as future needs of families today and over the next 20 to 30 years. I won't go into detail in respect of the housing numbers, but as already said, these rise quite significantly, with an additional 302 homes to be found every year. At the moment, the requirement is 260, and that rises to 580. It's therefore in this context that villages such as Brailsford will be required to take its share of this additional growth. Imperative to this growth, and as we've heard from many people here, is matching this with improvement to local services and facilities. The proposals before you aim to deliver sustainable growth and include financial contributions to ensure housing growth is matched with an improvement to both local services and physical infrastructure. This includes 30% affordable housing. So just to clarify matters on a point made by somebody earlier, it does meet local requirements. 8 affordable homes are to be provided on site. And there is a payment to be provided for the remaining 13 units that the council will deliver affordable units elsewhere where required. £70,000 is going towards the medical practice. There's just under 400,000 to Brailsford Primary School. £5,000 going towards Ashbourne Library to increase stock levels. There's £10,000 on sustainable travel tickets, £5,000 towards local allotments, and just under £20,000 to improve bus shelters at bus stops on the A52 and at the end of Luke Lane. We've heard from local residents about the key issues of importance to them in considering this application. Most notably, this includes local drainage and highways. A drainage strategy has been submitted to support this application. This includes technical information to demonstrate how the sustainable urban drainage system features included within the scheme, such as the attenuation basin, will minimise the risk of flooding. I just want to touch upon some of the technical details. So, essentially, uncontrolled surface water flows currently drain east and west boundaries of the site. We're proposing to capture that surface water within the site and direct all the flows into the attenuation basin, which is sized to accommodate 1 in 100 year plus 40% climate change. So the surface water will then be discharged to the culvert at a greenfield rate for all storm events. So essentially, this provides a significant betterment for the larger storm events as surface water runoff is held back in the attenuation basin and then is discharged slowly into the culvert at a lower rate, thereby avoiding the current uncontrolled surface waters towards Main Road. And that has been agreed with the local flood authority. In respect of highways, the application has considered the additional demands arising from the development and concludes that there are no unacceptable impact on capacity. I just wanted to pick up some other points that have been made by some of the other speakers today, which are in respect of the access, gradients, measurements, etc. Engineered drawings have been submitted as part of the application and do demonstrate that the access is deliverable. The County Council do have a policy on the number of units that can come forward off an existing cul-de-sac road. They have not objected to the application, and it's not unusual for housing schemes such as this, and is seen elsewhere where housing developments come off existing cul-de-sacs. In terms of landscape, there's no landscape objection from the officer, and in fact, the council's own assessment of landscape under the SLAR suggests that no or very little impact or issue identified would prevent the site from being brought forward for development. That's under its assessment of landscape.
Could you wind up now, Helen,
Yes.
please? You've run over your 5 minutes
That's fine.
quite a bit.
We fully endorse the officer's recommendation for approval, and in line with this, we respectfully invite you to grant permission for the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, everyone, for listening carefully to what Helen had to say. The next stage in our consideration is for our development manager to hopefully respond to some of the issues which have been raised this evening. Some of those issues are around the principle of development, and some of those are around whether, if the application were to be allowed, there's sufficient environmental safeguards, or whether the village is getting sufficient out of the development in terms of affordable housing to rent or purchase, or provision of other facilities which help the village to thrive. There's a number of issues which I'm sure Sean Robson will address and will be addressed during debate. Sean will then introduce his consideration. Sorry, it's not Sean, it's our colleague Miles who's going to introduce the application. Miles Joyce will then introduce his report to the committee, which sets out his reasoning for recommending approval. So Miles, over to you. Yeah, if you could helpfully address some of the issues which were raised during the public participation, that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will present and tackle anything covered in the presentation and answer questions above, should there be anything outstanding, if that's okay. The application is for outline application up to 70 dwellings, with approval sought for access only, the rest, all matters being reserved at Throstle Nest Way, Brailsford. The recommendation is to resolve to approve the application, subject completion of a Section 106 agreement and conditions delegated to the Director of Place. The site itself comprises 2 parcels of agricultural land, just over 4 hectares in area to the northwest of Brailsford. It includes an existing access onto Main Road, which has compromised visibility and is close to a pedestrian crossing point. This, in fact, was the main reason why the site was discounted as part of the Shlower work, which was undertaken in 2021. As you know, this site has a new access proposed off Throstle Nest Way. The site is located outside but partially on the edge of Brailsford. Policy S2 directs development to the most sustainable locations based on the services and facilities available in each settlement. Brailsford is a 3rd-tier settlement. The site is raised slightly from the housing development to its west and benefits from clearly defined outcrops of mature screening and woodland. The land is ranked 3, to the best of our knowledge, as best and most versatile agricultural land, which is good to moderate in quality. This is a significant distance northeast and east of the Brailsford Conservation Area. It is, however, within the vicinity of the following listed buildings: the school, which is Grade 2, the schoolhouse, also Grade 2, the bakery, another Grade 2, and Towns Well, and another Grade 2 listed building. The site is within an undesignated landscape with no special protected status. It is not in a setting of a nationally designated landscape. The more detailed reserve matters stage should outline plan permission to be granted for the following criteria. Permission today is outlined only for access. It will be in the reserve matter stage, a follow-up stage, appearance, access, internal circulation and manoeuvrability, landscaping, which will include planting, hard and soft landscaping and materials. Layouts will include buildings, routes and open spaces. The scale of development, including the size of the development, including the height, width and length of each proposed building. You've seen the statutory consultee responses in my report. There were 180 third-party concerns. However, some of these were repetitions, but the concerns essentially boil down to the following criteria: design and appearance, flood risk and drainage, highway capacity and safety, infrastructure, provision, landscaping impacts, biodiversity, and departure from planning policy. There's a site in a little more area, and you can see the routes through the site and the 2 areas for development. and also the existing landscaping and proposed landscaping on the site, planting the attenuation pond towards the south, draining down to the existing access. That's it in a little more detail. I mean, there isn't a great deal of information because it is an outline plan application. I can show you some more. This one looks towards Throstle Nest Way. This one looks southwest of the site. You see in between the two wooded areas on site. And if I go into some of the details regarding the principle of development, first of all, there is only a 3.49 year demonstration of housing land supply. It's well short of the 5-year housing land supply, so the tilted balance does apply. The neighbourhood plan is over 3 years old, and also there's no policies with regard to meeting housing requirements. So therefore the tilted balance does apply. Policy S4S, which has been mentioned already, says that plan permission should be granted, looking at things in around that no other policies are undermined and outweigh that principle. The PD5 landscape character to protect and enhance, and policy LW1 of the neighbourhood plan, and follow on strategic policy S1 and PD8 regards to flood risk. Overall, officers are of the opinion that the principle of development is accepted. In terms of affordable housing, 30% is required. The demand from our rural housing enabling officer was 8 affordable housing units on site and 13 dwellings to confirm are by way of contribution for off-site provision. The 8 on site will be 2 1-beds and 6 2-beds, and they will be in line with the nationally described space split standards, the details of which will come in with the reserved matters should planning permission be granted. HC11 regards to dwelling mix, in terms of affordable housing and later market housing, that will be more detail to come in at the reserve matter stage, but it does, on balance, look like it is in line with this. In terms of developer contributions, just to remind you, this has to be justified, and they are required to make the development acceptable. And it has been outlined by the applicant that are primary healthcare. There is a 70,000 contribution, a large primary education contribution, about 350,000, for almost 5,000 in libraries. And then there's significant highway and travel contributions. There's an allotment contribution. There's also provision of public open space and a children's play area on site. Provision of broadband infrastructure is to be conditioned as well. So there is significant developer contributions. In terms of archaeology and heritage, the Conservation Officer, looking at the proximity to the listed buildings, considers there may be less than substantial harm. Where there's less substantial harm to heritage assets, it needs to be put through a balance so that less substantial harm is outweighed by the public benefits. That was paragraph 208 of the National Planning Policy Guidance. It is now paragraph 215 as of today, but it's unchanged in its wording. And what I would say is that, the public benefits which have been set out here just are significant, and in our view, they do outweigh the less substantial harm. In terms of design, scale and appearance, reserve matters stage, those thorny details will be dealt with, not at this outline stage. In terms of open space, there's 1.9 hectares of open space, including the informal space around the attenuation basin, the children's play area, and we believe this is in line with policy H14 of the local plan. In terms of landscape impact, we've heard quite a lot about it. There will be more at the reserve matters stage will be looked at again, because they're looking at things like scale, design and impact. Clearly there will be an impact with a housing scheme, but the SHLA did note there was none or very little impact or issue identified which would prevent the site from being brought forward for development, at least in landscape terms. An assessment of the landscape value of the site and its immediate concept has been undertaken and has been concluded that this is a landscape of medium value. Now, the Shree officer, just to clarify, did ask for a landscape architect, but only at the reserve matters stage, so the outline permission would need to be granted. In terms of ecology, it is noted that there will be some impacts. The Derbyshire Wildlife Trust consider conditions relating to the lighting strategy. If there are any details to be submitted to safeguard bats and other nocturnal wildlife during site clearance, there will be a condition limiting that during the bird breeding season. A provision of a minimum of 21 bat boxes, that's 30% of dwellings, shall be erected into dwellings, as well by additional bat boxes erected into mature retained trees on site secured via condition. Biodiversity net gain is now a requirement under the Environment Act, and the majority of the baseline habitats will be lost in terms of facilitating the proposals. However, a small area of modified grassland and the 2 native hedgerows will be retained. Without mitigation, it's recognised proposal would result in a net loss of biodiversity. However, in mitigation, the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust requires conditions with regard to species enhancement, condition regarding biodiversity net gain, and that will be over a 25-year period to be monitored. So it will be over a long-term period. That will need to be sustained and managed. And a submission for approval of a construction environment management plan for more sensitive construction during that phase of the development. Public rights was a concern. Some further information was required from the County Public Rights of Way officer. They realised that there won't be any obstruction to the footpath, but if there was, they would need to apply to them for any changes in the footpath going forward. Highway matters, the Highway Authority does welcome the proposed provision of a multi-user link direct to the A52 main road, knowing that the precise specification of this route is to be determined at the detailed design, or that is a reserve matters stage. There will be various transport-related conditions, and we've heard too about the transport contributions, including a travel plan, which will be part of the recommendation to approve, both through a legal agreement and also via planning conditions attached to any grant of planning permission. In terms of flood risk and drainage, there was a hold and objection from the county lead local flood authority, and additional information was asked for, especially in relation to surface water flooding. We've heard about this being able to be diverted and managed. There was 2 or 3 bouts of additional information. These were submitted, subject to conditions. That holding objection has now been removed. So what I would say is that can be suitably mitigated through the imposition of those suitably worded conditions. Other matters to do with refuse storage, noise management, secure parking, pedestrian access are all to be dealt with at the reserve matters stage. So finally, to wrap up, the tilted balance is applied. That means it can't just be something which outweighs the positive impacts by negative impacts. It has to be a tilted balance. So it has to be substantially and demonstratively outweighing. So the balance is further in line in terms of granting planning permission. That balance has to be done. There is significant benefits. I mean, we've dealt with them before in terms of financial benefits, new housing, local spend, both short-term in terms of construction, and going on beyond that, there'll be direct jobs created, both at construction phase. So additional council tax payments, affordable housing provision, both on-site and off-site provisions as well. So ultimately, on balance, subject to the conditions and subject to legal agreement, the recommendation, which is a resolution to grant, subject to that, is what we remain and put forward to members to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Just before we move into questions from members, we do have some late correspondence which was received after the agenda was circulated to us. It's on your desk in front of you. If you just want to take 2 or 3 minutes to have a look through that, then we'll move into questions.
Just read them all.
Just for the benefit of members of the public, we now have a period where members of the committee can ask questions of Miles Joyce, and when those questions are finished, we then have a debate as to whether or not to support the recommendation of officers. Now, going to move into questions. Councillor Hughes, David, you were first.
Thank you, and Miles, thank you very much for an extremely thorough summing up there, along with your thorough report, which we always appreciate your reports because they are so thorough. I've got a couple of one clarification question, and that is about access to the A52. The plan, particularly the satellite the picture shows access directly onto the A52. And indeed, if you look at Google Maps, you can see that there's a track onto the site directly. And I think, Miles, did you say that they were going to consider that at reserve matters?
No, the access is a full plan, is the full aspect of this plan application, so it will be via Throstle Nest.
So they're not going to consider direct access onto the A52 at reserve matter stage? No. Okay, all right, thank you. The next question is about drainage and flooding, and I recognise that the developer's doing a lot of work to capture surface water runoff and potentially surface water runoff off-site into their attenuation basin. So there should be, in a lot of ways, there should be an improvement in that. But I'm more concerned with the LLFA's evaluation rather than perhaps what the developer is putting forward. And we know that we were just a few months ago, we approved the Cameron Homes development on the junction of Luke Lane and Mercaston Lane, and that feeds into the runoff from that needs to be taken into consideration along with the other runoffs. Has a cumulative impact assessment been undertaken for all the new development happening along that drainage channel, that watercourse? So I think that's something the LLFA needs to think about, I think.
Well, I can get back to you. There are some concerns about obviously surface water, and from the LLFA, they came back today. They said that, in their view, the developer has demonstrated that surface water runoff from the site pre-development is not increased post-development. This information is provided in a reference documents in our recommended conditions. That's their take on that. We've heard as well from the agents themselves that the uncontrolled surface water flows currently and drains to the east and west boundaries. We are proposing to capture surface water within the site and direct all flows to the attenuation basin that has been sized to accommodate the 1 in 100 years plus 40% climate change events. Surface water will then be discharged to the culvert at the greenfield annual average rate for all storm events up to the 1 in 100 plus 40% climate change events. And they feel that this provides significant betterment for the larger storm events as surface water run-up is held back in the attenuation basin and discharged slowly into the culvert at the lower greenfield rate, thereby avoiding the current uncontrolled surface water flows towards the main road.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the developer is doing a lot of work to control the surface water runoff, and I accepted that. The issue is the cumulative impact of all the development that's going on in Brailsford on the ordinary watercourses. And has that been assessed by the LLFA? Because
well, the LLFA will assess and they will ask questions, and they had holding objections because they required further information. And I say again, as they are the experts,
So
that is what they would ask for.
So they haven't actually.
I wouldn't be able to say
We don't
one.
know that they have. Okay.
No.
The next question is about the sewage system. Now, I understand the sewage system in Brailsford is a combined sewage system, so it takes rainwater and it also takes sewage. And we have a lot of evidence that the sewage system overflows when there's rainwater. Now, the Flood and Water Management Act 2010 places responsibilities for flooding on the LLFA. They need to be able to control it. And paragraph 1 of that includes flooding from sewer systems when that's caused by rainfall. Now, I assume that rainwater is not going to go into the sewer from this new development, but there is rainwater going into that sewer from other developments, and that sewer is already overflowing. So has the LLFA taken into consideration, or has it taken its responsibility over flooding from a combined sewer from rainwater, excess water situations, in determining whether the sewer has sufficient capacity to take the additional sewage without overflowing?
Well, once again, we are looking at what's before us and looking at what was required by the lead local flood authority to remove their holding objection. So we have to look at it in that context.
But we don't know. So,
but if you have to look at it in that context, that question is an academic one.
Well, it's not academic to all the people here.
No, but it is
Absolutely not academic. And that is the trouble. It is not an academic question. It is real for the people of Brailsford, as it is real for many other people in Derbyshire Dales and elsewhere in Derbyshire. With the LLFA does not fulfil its responsibilities under the Flood and Water Management Act.
Please,
so anyway, those were my questions.
Okay. If we could just restrict ourselves to questions, whether or not we agree with the answers, we can consider in debate. Sean, did you want to intervene?
Yes, just to come back on that point to Councillor Hughes. I mean, if Councillor Hughes can cast his mind back less than a month, the PAS training, they were quite clear. We are not the drainage authority. When there's a two-tier authority system, let me finish before you come across me. We cannot, if the LFA come back with a point, whether we believe it or not, or whether you believe it or not as councillors, they are the drainage authority. I think that was quite clear from the training, councillor.
Okay, can we please not have a personal debate here? Let's return to this during the debate.
Can I just say one thing, though, and that is that the LLFA never represents itself at these planning meetings, and it doesn't even do so at even bigger ones where we have.
Councillor Dobbs. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Miles, I emailed you a fairly detailed question yesterday. It picks up some of Councillor Hughes's points. To cut to the chase, basically, the balancing pond, the Suds Pond, drains into a stormwater sewer, which runs under the road. I'm right so far? Yep. And presumably ultimately finds its way south of the main road, A52, and where it becomes open for a bit, but some of it's culverted. My question is, has there been any data on its capacity supplied? Because one of the interesting things about Brailsford is you frequently see water coming out of the gullies as you drive past, which is a curious phenomenon and rather suggests that they're overwhelmed. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the actual data wasn't by your question, Councillor, earlier. Sorry.
Sorry?
You said you sent a question to me earlier.
It was yesterday.
Yes, yeah, but the data wasn't part of that.
Well, it was just, have you got any information about the capacity of it?
No, I mean, I would rely on the lead local flood authority. And they do rely on a lot of data. They rely on a lot of data and they come back for more data.
Right, it's
and
just...
which was provided.
Sorry, it was the Lees Roxburgh response did seem to go off at a complete tangent, did you not think?
Well, I mean, the answer got back was what I said before from Adam Hunt, the lead local flood authority, and that is the developer has demonstrated the surface water run-up from the site pre-development is not increased post-development. This information is provided in the reference documents in our recommended conditions. The following up from the agents was about a 1 in 100 year 40% climate change event. So that's the information I sought based on your question.
Okay, thank you. Second question, and that is it a material consideration in planning law, loss of amenity due to excess traffic in a cul-de-sac? Is that a material consideration? Loss of amenity to residents when the house that they moved into in a cul-de-sac ceases to be in a cul-de-sac? Thank you.
Well, it would be on the overall merits of the scheme. I mean, the cul-de-sac would not remain necessarily a cul-de-sac, would it? It would be the whole round. It's the whole round. You have to look at the whole round, all of the national planning policy, the local planning policy and guidance, because some, you know, in this instance, that's what we've looked at. You know, is the scheme overall acceptable? I understand many disagree, but we say yes, it does. Amenity would come into issues such as what is the impact, but, you know, that would be, in this way, we would also be reliant on the County Highway Authority. Again, they are the authority when it comes to highway matters.
But if I can clarify, what I'm saying is that is it something that we can weigh up as a harm of whatever magnitude as a material planning consideration? And of course, the highways haven't assessed that. They don't do amenity.
Well, they would look at flows, and they would look at road widths, and they would look at the type of vehicles using that. We have conditions relating to the construction phase. Yes, so part of it is weighed up by us, you know, in terms of the construction phase. Going forward, yes, it could be material planning consideration. What do you weigh it against? You weigh it against everything else.
So, Lees. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I understand, fully appreciate what the planning officer said about the local flood authority. It's not a planning issue, but I do have to agree with my colleagues across the way here. Brailsford, for those that do travel through, is continuously flooded on the A52 when you go through it when there's been heavy rain. An attenuation pond with an outlet into an existing culvert is not going to make the slightest bit of difference. It's still going to overflow and flood as it does now, in my opinion. I know it's not a planning opinion, not a planning material issue, but that's what I'd just like to bring that point up. The other thing is school.
Stuart, please, questions, please.
Have you switched me off? That's it. The school issue. Does the school build its accommodation before the development is done? If not, where do these children go to school?
Well, it will be contributions that are requested are based on need, you know, and if there is an identified need, then contributions will be asked for by the County Education Authority. Now that can either be, can be in some cases a whole new school, it can be extensions, or it can merely be to accommodate greater pupil numbers, but that is a matter for them. They assess this, they ask for a contribution per pupil, and that's what they ask for. And in this case, in terms of primary school education, there was a significant need identified, and therefore a contribution of well over £300,000 was asked for. Plus for just under 5,000 for libraries contribution, but not for secondary because there's no capacity issues there.
Yeah, so basically then we don't know when it is to be done or where it's to be done. Whether it's to be done in Brailsford School or whether it's to be done elsewhere or when.
Well, I mean, that's a matter for the county, isn't it? I mean, we are here, if we invite a legal agreement with contributions that they are asking for, then that is part of the mitigation. That is justified. As long as it's justified, that has to be part of the Section 106 agreement, which is attached to this planning permission, should planning permission be granted.
Right, thank you. The last one, Highways Authority. Is this another classic case of a desktop study, or have they actually been out on site and assessed all this? Because we have had loads of applications where they've just done a desktop study and not actually visited a site.
Well, again, I have to say, we rely on them as the authority. We are not the authority, they are. And they will do things in the best way they see fit. We can't demand that they do things one way or another. But if they come back with requirements, and they have in this case with contributions, with conditions, then those conditions, as they're justified, as those contributions are justified, they will be attached either through legal agreement or planning conditions with any grant of planning permission.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the principle of asking these questions is, we've had these outline applications come in to us before, we've agreed to them, and then we go to reserve matters and we've not been able to add a say because we should have said it at outline. So that's my reason for me questions. Thank you.
Residents, I understand your passion here. I do understand your passion, but it's difficult for officers to concentrate and on their reply. It's a very serious consideration we're making here, so please do your best not to interrupt and applaud or groan. It does make it difficult for members and officers to concentrate, and that's what we need to do. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. For many years, we've seen development increase in Brailsford enormously. There's been many, many new developments. I've asked previously in regard to Severn Trent and sewages, and asked for a report from Severn Trent on each application. I'm asking again, have Severn Trent sent a report in if they're improving the infrastructure? Because this can't keep, infrastructure won't keep taking more and more and more. It's got to be improved and modified. And Severn Trent, don't
Please,
really send a report
just keep
in.
to your question, please.
You've picked me off. You switched me off, Chair. Can we see a report from Severn Trent on improvements in infrastructure?
We can certainly ask them, yes.
Yes. I've asked before, but it never seems to come through. Thank you.
Is that it, Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You switched me off now.
I never thought I could switch you off. I've tried many times, but never succeeded.
Yeah, but questions have been answered with David and Peter.
Right, Councillor Shelley, please.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Like in many situations, we're faced with a lot of, you can call it anecdotal evidence from local residents here, but they are the ones who are effectively the experts on what happens in their own backyard. And it's a shame that we're in this position where we're faced with evidence that we can't really see from some of the statutory bodies, and that's pitched against the local knowledge, and that will come up again, I'm sure, a little later on tonight. My question really relates specifically to the highways point. So we had a lot of comment about the excess traffic there. I believe I was right in hearing one of the speakers referring to the width of the road and a suggestion that it was less than a metre wider than it needed to be. Can you reassure us that we've had evidence from the Highways Authority that counters that or makes it clear that the capacity of this access road is going to be adequate, please?
As far as I remember, there's not anything specific on road width. However, it is something they would always take into their consideration. I mean, obviously, you've got the bus stop enhancements, you've got the various contributions. In terms of highway conditions, you've got the pre-commencement condition requiring further information regarding the highway improvements, off-site works, which are the enhancements to the existing signal control crossing on the A52 and the site access from Throstle Nest Way, and the updated travel plan as well, which would be, I think, preoccupation. So that issue, there's also obviously the construction conditions as well, limiting hours, construction management plan, construction environmental management plan required. So they haven't come back with any objection to the road width. So I have to say they do if they have an objection. I've known it before when they have concerns, but in this instance they don't.
Thank you, Miles. I think that's a very relevant question asked by Councillor Shelley, and you've given a definitive answer whether we like it or not. Councillor Beaufort, Councillor Sue Beaufort.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Can I say first of all that, you know, as a council, we have asked over and over and over again for someone on major applications from the County Council and from the Lead Flood Authority to come to these meetings and justify what they are saying. Now, well, I know I'll say a bit more later because it is questions. So I wonder whether, Miles, I think we need, for clarification, I think we need a definition of what are considered to be the public benefits of this development, and how do we balance that against the harm to the village of Brailsford itself? I think that's what us as councillors are trying to decide in our own mind. So that's the first question. The second question is actually about affordable housing. So our policy HC4 seeks to maximise affordable housing, and for developments of 11 or more it should be 30%. Now, if my maths is correct, 30% of 70 is not 8. So I just wondered if you could answer that one.
Answer the first one. Sorry, the second question first. It was the housing enabling officer looking at demand that said we can have 8 on site and the rest can be off-site contributions. Hence the £600,000, which is part of the Section 106 agreement, which has been requested. So there's that. So it wouldn't necessarily all be on site, depending on demand. I think the other thing in terms of benefits, affordable housing would be one. Developer contributions could be another, whether it's going towards primary care, going towards education, going towards affordable housing, off-site, libraries in this case, and transport and highway improvement. So they're the ones relevant in this case. Could be broadband provision, which is a condition rather than a 106. It could also be jobs created, homes built, amenity issues, biodiversity net gain. These are things which are essentially public benefits rather than, there would be private benefits too for individual households, but these are public benefits which you would say are there, spend additional council tax receipts, various. So all of this is our public benefits. You know, in terms of the harm, you have to balance it against that, and it must be substantially and demonstratively outweighing those benefits to tilt the balance towards refusal.
If I could just come back, Chair, if that's okay. So is that for us as members to do that, to assess one against the other?
I think it's for us as the presenting officers to make this judgment, to make this appraisal, and to communicate it to you, and then it's for you to make the decision.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Beaufort. Sorry, so Councillor Burton.
Miles, in your presentation, you mentioned a phrase that troubled me, and I'd like you to perhaps just explain a little more in terms of the site and landscape. You used the phrase medium value. What do you mean by medium value?
I think if I recall correctly, that was from a landscape assessment. So it would be something which wouldn't be outstanding value. It would be middle of the road, and you'd give that kind of weight accordingly to that. Now, it's going to be something that I think is going to re-emerge if this gets granted at the reserve matters stage. So, obviously there's going to be scale, design, materials. It's going to be obviously impactful. At the moment we know the potential impacts. Then it's going to be more concrete.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from any members? Peter, want to come back?
Can I come back quickly? In terms of landscape value, can you do it the other way? As one of the speakers said, this is a great place to look at other things from. Does that count as landscape value?
Well, my understanding is that it'd be what is the quality of the landscape, what was the impact of the development. I mean, you may consider it overall to be negative because it's a large number of homes. Is that in itself something, though, that would outweigh the merits of the scheme in its entirety? I suppose, like everything, it's a balance that you need to assess.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's if you stand on the existing footpath and look around, it's great. You won't be able to do that with all these houses there. Does that count as landscape value?
You could, but then what about everything else that's positive that you could put forward? Or actually other negative things? That's where it has to be the whole balance.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, it's a bit like the disturbance to Throstle Nest residents. You could, would that outweigh, if that's demonstrated, would that outweigh the scheme overall?
Councillor Boynton, John.
Thank you. There's reference in your report of an underground reservoir initially making the fields undevelopable. Can you comment on that? Is that a planning issue or is that down to a potential developer?
Well, it's a bit like that would be something which is for looking at in the round. I mean, again, you rely on the county on that. If they don't object, if they don't see that as an issue, it's not an issue for us. We would accept that, and
So it's county's responsibility. Any outcome?
Well, as the flood authority, would there be an impact for this? No, it seems that no one has said there is an impact here in those terms.
Okay, I'm not entirely happy with not with your answer, but with what's happened potentially. But it is what it is, I guess.
Councillor Hughes, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me come back. I mean, we're in a difficult position because we know how the planning inspector will review this, but we've got outstanding issues. So it's likely that we really can't not approve it at some stage, but we need to address the outstanding issues so that we're as comfortable as we can be in doing so. And my concerns are to do with the cumulative impact of the different sites and the flooding caused by rainfall in the sewage system. Can we defer and ask the LLFA to provide that assessment at this stage? And any other on highways, for example, if we have questions of highways, but particularly LLFA in my case.
Members can defer, but if you have to be, I think, very careful what you're asking for, and on the assumption that all other matters tonight have been satisfactorily discussed. I think we can ask for further information from say, the lead local flood authority from highways. But it may be that they can't provide a cumulative impact. That may be something that's beyond what they can reasonably do for a development of this size. I mean, that possibility too, and we may have to report back on that ground.
I think, David, you've asked a question in principle there, essentially, would there be grounds for a deferment? And I think it'd be helpful to have a definitive response from Development Manager on that.
Yes, through you, Chair, and back to Councillor Hughes. I mean, if members are minded to do so, yes, it can be deferred, but as Miles did pick up, it would have to be quite clear what we were deferring it on. Because effectively, if it's simply put 2 points out there. If we were going to back to the Highway Authority and the County Council in their capacity also as the local lead flood authority, we'd have to make it quite clear and what we're asking them to come back on. And unfortunately, as Miles did reflect then, we can ask them for that. They may well come back hypothetically and say a development of this size it either exceeds that threshold or it doesn't, and our standing advice would be X. I'm speculating, but it may not be as fruitful as perhaps you might expect or hope, I'm afraid.
Councillor Slack?
Yes, I agree with David, probably deferral. Again, on the infrastructure, Severn Trent's infrastructure, we haven't had a proper report for a long time, and we ought to have if we defer it, we ought to have a report from Severn Trent on the state of the infrastructure, because same as we've said, capacity is increasing and increasing and increasing. And what have they done to improve it?
Right, if no further questions from colleagues, we're going to move into debate. Just by way of introduction to that, it's clear that we do have both local plan policies and government policies which would seem to suggest that it would be difficult not to approve the principle of development on this site. That would be my interpretation. Others may or may not agree with that. Even if the principle were accepted, there are issues as to whether if you like, the conditions and the obligations which might be applied to this particular application are sufficient for us to judge that there are enough benefits to the local community. So that is a consideration which we need to tease out during the debate. The comment I would make, which you've often heard me say, is around the type of housing that is proposed to be developed here, and I think we've debated on other occasions the need to ensure we're providing housing to meet the needs of Derbyshire residents rather than create exclusive developments for the benefit of people moving in from elsewhere in the country. And I do have a concern. I don't share the view of our housing colleagues that 8 affordable houses on this development is sufficient. And I know colleagues don't always agree with me when I say that affordable housing for sale is something which we're sorely missing in this part of the world. So I would prefer, I have to say, in addition to some social rented housing, which is always welcome, I would prefer that we had rather more than just 2 units of affordable housing for sale on this site, but that represents my personal opinion. Right, to move into debate, we need a proposal from the floor. We have a recommendation to approve the application subject to a number of conditions. Would someone like to make a proposal, please? Councillor Lees.
Go on then, Chair, I'll put my head on the block. I'd like to go against officer recommendation, Chair. My reasons being, even though it's a comprehensive report with a lot of detail in it, I don't think there's sufficient detail from the statutory bodies that I don't feel comfortable with, by no means. So that is my reason that I want to go against officer's recommendation. I don't think it fits in with policy PD8 either. I don't think it fits in with the affordable housing, HC4. I think it has got impact on the residential amenity and the flood risk and the drainage. We do need these statutory bodies to come to a meeting. I'm not saying I wouldn't approve it if we got some definite answers, be a different ball game. But I think the applicant should. I'd like to see the applicant go away and come back with a lot of these questions answered before it comes before us, and it'll make the matter a lot simpler if we've got these defined answers. And And that's my reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Just to be clear, Stuart, you're moving a refusal rather than a deferral.
I think I'd sooner have a refusal so the applicant has got a chance to come back rather than a deferment under just certain things.
Thank you. Okay, that's clear. Do we have anyone prepared to second that proposal? Councillor Froggatt, do you wish to add anything at this stage?
Other than on the site visit on Monday, it was obvious that this site is not suitable as it stands. I will speak more in debate, but I agree with Councillor Lees, but I just don't think it's suitable.
Right, before we continue with the debate, I'm going to just adjourn for 5 minutes to ask our development manager and Miles Joyce to discuss with the mover and seconder whether they think the proposed reason for refusal are reasonable, shall we say. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes now to enable you to have a discussion. Meeting. Apologies for the delay there, but it was important that we ensure we're going about this consideration in most appropriate and legalistically appropriate and reasonable way. I'd like to, members, I'd like to reach as quickly as possible a decision in principle on the proposal which Councillor Lees and Councillor Froggatt have put forward. Would anyone like to make any further contributions during the debate, or would you like to move to a vote at an early time? Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could we alter it, please, for a deferment rather than a refusal, please, at the moment? My proposal would be that we defer this application for additional information as to whether the cumulative impact on the recent developments in Brailsford has been assessed, and I'd like more information as well on the affordable housing need as well.
Councillor Froggatt. Right, that is a different proposal now. It's just before we open the debate on that. It's I have to say from the chair, it's a proposal I would have difficulty in supporting at this stage because I understand the issues, but to me there's a decision in principle to be made, and I think the genuine concerns that you raised would be addressed as part of any conditions. But we'll open it to debate. Councillor Hughes.
Chair.
Yes, you'll form me with. Well, yes.
Yeah, they'll need the proposer second. They'll need to withdraw the first proposal before they can propose a new one.
We will withdraw our first proposal.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Chair, thank you. I'd like to support Stuart and Helen's proposal. I would like to possibly add a little bit to it, if that's possible. I'd like to ask the LLFA to exercise its responsibilities concerning flood risk management, and Flood and Water Act 2010. Which applies to floods of all kinds, including floods that originate from sewage systems due to rainwater. So it's a technical issue because the flood authority does not have responsibility for sewage flooding except that which is caused by rainwater. So, but if rainwater is getting into the sewage system, and the sewage system is then overflowing, that is an issue that would fall to the LLFA to respond to. But the issue here is that the deferment should determine that whether, in the LLFA's opinion, additional development in Brailsford will cause more flooding from the sewer system or culverts from rainwater events. So it's complicated. It has to be technical because of the wording of the Act. I appreciate that deferment is not what residents want, and it's probably not what the committee wants. But we have a history of working with or against the planning inspector, or planning inspectors coming to decisions that are different from what this committee comes to with respect to drainage and flooding and highways. And we had a recent one in Holland Ward. It was a smaller development, but it was again built on the end of the cul-de-sac. But that cul-de-sac was actually a privately owned driveway, and with a gate at the end, and a right of way for vehicular access to the field beyond. And we voted against that, and it went to a planning appeal, and we were overturned, and the development is going ahead. The road was narrower. There were only 16 houses there, not 70, but the road was narrower, and it was the driveway was narrower, and it was obstructed by a window, and yet it was still passed by the planning inspectorate. So I think my view, I suspect my colleagues' view will be that the opening it up, the site up out of the cul-de-sac would not be supported by the planning inspectorate. So if we made the decision to stop the development on those grounds, it is likely that on appeal the planning inspectorate would find against us. There are other issues, but I think that's the position that we're in at this stage.
Thank you, David. Could I suggest that if the proposal to defer is supported, if there are any other issues which you think officers should address during a period of deferment, please raise them now. It won't be helpful if that was supported for them to be raised as a subsequent meeting. So please, if there are any other issues you think should be taken on board, please do address them now. Councillor Slack, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. Could you include what I've already said about we want a proper report from Severn Trent on what improvements they've made over the last few years, because they never really reported on what infrastructure they've made, improvements they've made.
So through you, Chair, we can certainly request that.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor. I mean, obviously I can't sit here and say, yes, we will get that back from Severn, but we'll certainly
try
make
and
it quite
request it of them,
clear to them that we
Thank you,
need that
sure.
information.
Thank you, sure.
Well, just to be clear, that's to Councillor Lees and Froggatt. In addition to your reason for a deferral, Councillor Slack is asking that a separate request is made to Severn Trent Water in respect of their responsibilities. Is that acceptable?
Yes, Chair, both acceptable to me.
Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Stuart, I'm going to add another one. Rather like in sequential tests, I believe an alternative construction traffic route should have been explored, and it hasn't been. Could we ask the applicant to explore the possibility of taking all these vehicles in to this site via a more appropriate, from the sort of residents' point of view and highway safety, route?
Any comments on that, Miles?
It can certainly be added to the additional information sought, yes.
May I add a little detail to that? I'm sorry to keep adding things, but I think a lot of our issue here is that we don't feel we're getting sight of the evidence from our friends at the County Council. It would be very helpful on that particular point to see the actual evidence base that they're judging it against at the same time. Thank you.
Any further contributions from anybody? Could I add something from my own perspective? I think has been raised by a number of colleagues and by residents. That's the cumulative effect of developments on the traffic along the A52 through the village. Asking colleagues here and officers whether you think it would be in order to ask for consideration to mitigation of the impact of traffic on the A52 through the village by way of further speed reduction or safety measures to enhance to improve the safety for existing and future residents of the village. Would anyone find that helpful? Not.
It's already 30 mile an hour through Brailsford, and I think if you do it on the A52, you've got to do it on Loop Lane, you've got to do it everywhere. So I'm not 100% on that one, Chair.
Okay, we'll leave that to one side then. Right, if no further contributions, we're going to take a vote now. Could we please have the reasons for deferral set out so that it's clear to all residents and those at home listening?
Yes, through you, Chair. I think I've picked these up. I'm sure Miles will come in if I've missed anything or I haven't written it down correctly. So in no particular order, we're going to ask Severn Trent for an infrastructure report to see what the impact is of this proposal and what the infrastructure is in Derbyshire Dales and specifically Brailsford. I mean, they may or may not come back on that point. We're going to ask the LLFA about the cumulative impact of this development and those that have already had consent or the ones that we've already consulted upon within Brailsford. Linked into that, we'll be asking them about whether or not they have, or asking for evidence that they've exercised their responsibilities under the Flood Act of 2010, and specifically to do with flood waters or flooding from sewers, culverts and other impacts. So have they looked at that and what is their comment on that? So a more comprehensive response. We'll be asking highways, and forgive me, I don't know who mentioned this one, I may have written this down incorrectly, asking highways about the access arrangement from Throstle Nest Way, just to see if that is actually wide enough to take the proposed development, i.e. the approved plan that's been submitted for them to reconfirm that that is the exact measurement of what it should be. And then an alternative construction route to ask whether that can be explored, and then just confirmation on the affordable housing breakdown in terms of how that's going to be facilitated. I think that was it, Miles, unless there's anything you want to add.
The evidence-based highways use.
Yes, about transparency of the evidence-based that highways use. Can they at least give us something what they looked at and how that's pulled through to their comments? So effectively a more comprehensive response from them and with a rationale behind that.
Right, can I have all those in favour please show? Right, that is unanimous and that is carried, and therefore the application is deferred for further consideration on those grounds. Just to remind residents and members of the public here, this does mean that the committee has not expressed a view on the merits or otherwise of the application. We'll have a full debate when we receive the information back as requested. Okay, we're going to have a short adjournment now while we're welcome to, could I ask those who are here, if you wish to hear the debate about the planning application on Old Hackney Lane, would you mind decanting to the room next door if you wish to stay, because we have a large number of residents there who want to come and participate as you have done. And thank you for taking the time and trouble to come this evening. As you I think understood, it's a complex and difficult issue for the planning committee to deliberate on. But your contributions, I think, have been very helpful in helping us arrive at these decisions. And have a safe journey home. second application, which is the land at Old Hackney Lane. Before we start, I do again need to formally apologise to the Darlydale Council and to residents who may have attended or may have gone to a site visit yesterday, Wednesday, on the basis of receiving a letter from the District Council saying that's when the site visit would be held, whereas in fact we held a site visit on Monday. Administrative oversight on the council's part, for which again I apologise. A second letter was sent out subsequent to the incorrect first letter, but I understand that may have not reached everyone in time. I also apologise for the heat in the room here. Unfortunately, it's nothing we seem to be able to do anything about. I do apologise, but do feel free to avail yourselves of fresh water out in the corridor there. So we do have a number of speakers here this evening. Our first one is James Wilson on behalf of Darlydale Town Council. James, because of the error by the council, I'm more than happy to allow you 5 or 6 minutes to express views on behalf of the town council. So,
yeah, would you mind me interrupting just for a moment, if that's all right? Just to say, to follow on from what you said about the letter and the error, it did make me feel very uncomfortable to think that they didn't know when the site visit was, but an explanation's been given, and I am prepared to accept that and hope that they do too.
yes. After James has addressed the committee, I know Councillor Burton would also like to make an additional address on behalf of the town council.
First of all, thank you for your apology. Let's not get too caught up in administrative errors. We can deal with that after tonight's very important meeting. So, firstly, I hope that tonight's decision will be made under the recommendations for house building targets that were in place when this application was originally submitted and when it was resubmitted. I know that it was mentioned at the start about the new targets, and I think it's very important that we don't get distracted by targets that were released today and effectively are not in force yet. I'd also like to commend the chair of Brailsford Parish Council with her words in the previous application, and I share the sentiments, and so do my residents. So moving on to this application, biodiversity in the UK is at 53%, and this and similar developments will continue to degrade that figure. Biodiversity net gain does not guarantee that the habitat that is lost is gained in the same area of development, so the historic settlements of Darlydale and Hackney will be degraded by this development. The site is an important and uninterrupted thoroughfare for wildlife, and development would further erode space for nature. The site is located adjacent to a road that is already a problem. An increase in traffic trying to gain access to the A6 at an awful junction will only serve to cause further disruption. Something I'm sure you probably don't hear much at these meetings, but something that I take a keen observation in is data held by the UK Soil Observatory. Their maps show that the soil in this area has a carbon concentration of 62.8 tonnes per hectare, down to a level of 15 centimetres. That will all be released upon being disturbed. Add this to the estimated 50 tonnes per unit that is released by building a new home, and we are looking at in excess of 1,970 metric tonnes of carbon being released by this development. The application is in contrast to policy PD10, and I hope you're all aware of policy PD10, but if not, please let me know and I'll be happy to refresh you. Of some concern to myself is the diversion of the watercourse. I believe that this could have serious implications on the homes that were built at Bowden Close, which, despite extensive engineering during building, have already been subject to flooding. I would also like you to remember that there is no method of recourse for those that live here if you approve this application. You will hear from people who care deeply about their area, and should this application be approved, you will open the doors to development that will see the distinct individual character of Hackney and Darley disappear. Again, there's no mechanism for those that care most to appeal this decision, so I urge you to make a sensible and informed decision based on the facts you have heard here tonight. The planning officer has gone to great lengths here tonight to talk about weight of balance and point out where weight of balance falls in favour of approval. But please allow me to remind you that weight of balance is also given to material considerations, and that planning decisions be made in accordance with the development plan, of which this application is clearly in contradiction of. That's all I've got to say on the matter tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, James, very much. Councillor Burton is now going to read out a statement on behalf of the Town Council.
Thank you for this opportunity, Chair. I received this email via Councillor Roger Shelley, a fellow ward member, around midday today, and in good faith, Town Councillor David Wheeler, if he'd have had the right information, would have been present on Monday. He's a well-meaning local resident, and I have a lot of respect for him, and it's important. At the end of the email, he put, maybe it would be possible for Councillor David Burton to express these on my behalf. So thank you, Chair. Policy DP10. Matlock to Darley-Dale A6 corridor. In order to safeguard the intrinsic value and quality of the open spaces through the Derwent Valley between Matlock and Darley-Dale, and to prevent the further conveyance of the settlements of Matlock and Darley-Dale, the District Council will resist development proposals which threatens the open spaces identified on the proposal's policies map, unless A, the development is required for the purposes of agriculture, forestry or outdoor recreation, B, the development does not have an adverse impact upon the character of the area, including views into and out from the Derwent Valley. This is David Wheeler now just saying, I have a slight problem in that I'm new to the planning process and have only had basic training so far. I suspect that my views are different to that of Darley-Dale Town Council, but I'm not able to test that before tonight. I therefore feel uncomfortable at attending the meeting in case I'm pushed for a decision. Basically, I have two concerns. One, that due process has been followed. Two, that I have not seen any reasons for deviating from the local plan in any of the replies given to the submission. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Next speaker is David Chapman. Is David here? Not to worry. Simon Redmore. Simon, if you could try to keep to 3 or 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a resident of Old Hackney Lane. I have been for 10 years, and I am strongly opposed to this application. Tens of thousands of words have been written about the application before you tonight, but actually the question facing members is very simple. Does this council want to follow its own planning policies, yes or no? 61% of the land in this application is for unallocated open pasture land outside the designated settlement boundary and which provides an essential gap between settlements. Last year, an almost identical planning application was made for this site. The officer's report on that later withdrawn application was damning and recommended refusal. The council's strategic housing land assessment concluded that, quote, the site is not considered developable because of the impact of development on the open nature of the landscape. In June, a report on landscape, which this council commissioned in relation to this application, said, quote, development of the site for housing will result in significant adverse impact on landscape character and visual amenity. Chair, the only reason that your officers have done an about turn and are now recommending approval is revealed in paragraph 7.7 of their report, namely the absence of the 5-year housing land supply, which we heard about in your last debate. Chair, we saw a draft of the new NPPF in July. The final version, all 82 pages of it, is less than 12 hours old. It is nuanced. There are aspects in there which I'm sure you will want to consider. And I was a little surprised at the planning officer suggestion earlier, which seemed to imply that the lack of a 5-year land supply trumps every other single argument. Surely that cannot be right. The Secretary of State has indeed been clear about the importance of the land supply and, in its absence, a presumption in favour of development. But she has also been clear that the presumption is not open-ended and does not offer a route to creating poor quality places. This application fails that test and, if granted, would have a significant adverse impact on the area. The officers hope to give you some comfort in paragraph 7.22 of their report, which says that there would remain an area of steeply sloping farmland adjacent to the site, which would continue to provide some separation. Be under no illusion, Chair, this application provides for 3 vehicular access points into that farmland. The applicant's intentions are clear. If you grant approval to this application tonight, you will be powerless to stop the development of that land. Chair, as you discuss this application, may I ask you consider first, is the absence of a 5-year land supply, in this case, sufficient reason to lose forever this strategically important area of open countryside when it fails the test in the national guidance and is contrary to the local plan? Second, if this committee has any hope of preventing the coalescence of settlements, it must not grant permission to a proposal which provides for 3 vehicle access points into adjoining countryside. There is only one conclusion which can be reached if this committee is to abide by its adopted policies. This application must be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. That was helpful. Emma Hickling, please. Emma. Sorry, just before you start, I've been reminded that we've reached the bewitching hour of 8:30, which, to avoid us being transmogrified into something terrible, requires a resolution to continue the meeting for another 30 minutes. Would someone like to propose that?
I'm happy to
Councillor Lees,
propose that.
seconded by Councillor Burfoot. All those in favour, please show. So that's carried. Sorry, carry on. You.
Okay, we already submitted 2 letters detailing our objections to this site based on failure to meet 6 different planning policies. However, this evening I will just focus on policy PD8, flood risk management, and the impact of this development on the Whitworth Hospital. In the flood risk assessment report, page 16, the developer states that this land is unsuitable for sustainable urban drainage systems. Yet this site already has a pond managing surface water that's been in use since 2007, over 16 years. Indeed, it's obviously doing a good job because the authors of the flood risk report have found no evidence of flooding downstream of the pond. The developer wants to remove this pond and replace it with homes. This pond currently attenuates the water flow from the hill above this site before it drains into a culvert running under the Whitworth Hospital and another new housing development below the hospital, which I think is a Bowden Close development. Nobody knows who owns this culvert, who is responsible for maintaining it. The developers commissioned a condition survey of the culvert, but it was abandoned because, and I quote, of displaced stone bricks, the irregular basis of the culvert, meandering route, full of land drains which prevented the camera from going any further. Indeed, the developers themselves acknowledge that this culvert cannot be used to drain water from this site. Yet they still think that they can use this culvert to drain water from the fields above by connecting a new pipe from the fields above through their site directly into the culvert. They claim to have done modelling that demonstrates that no flooding will take place if they continue to use this culvert to drain water from the field above. But they don't know the capacity of this culvert, how much water it can handle, and therefore the modelling that they've done is meaningless because they don't know what size the culvert is. We feel that if the culvert is not considered suitable for surface water drainage from this site, then it should not be used to drain the water from the fields above. This is for 2 reasons. As the pond is being removed, the stormwater flows into the culvert will no longer be attenuated and could exceed the capacity of the culvert. Storm events are increasing in duration and intensity, as we know from the recent Storm Babette, which badly affected Derbyshire, and the more recent storm this weekend. Any failure of this culvert to handle these more intense storm events will simply lead to flooding of the hospital, the new housing estate below the hospital, and any housing built on this site. So we would ask you to reject this planning application on the basis that the developer's proposals for surface water drainage do not address the flood risk to our hospital and to existing homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, very much. Carol Taylor, next, please.
Hi, my name's Carol Taylor. I'm here representing the old Hackney Lane Darley House Estate Group. As you can imagine, we are the community most affected by this proposal. There's 150 dwellings in the two areas, and we've been in touch with every single one of them through a newsletter that we regularly send out, and personally spoken to as many of them as possible. And there is nobody who doesn't object to this scheme on the lane or in the estate. We're aware of the government's targets and the supposed relaxation of the planning rules, etc., but we also know that planning applications need to comply with local plans, and as has already been said, much of this development is outside of the local plan. It's not grey area, it's not brown land, it's green field full of, well, green grass, obviously, and lots of wildlife. The documents from the officers with the numerous objections from the residents make all the relevant points last time, but I'll just make the major ones. This is a green space between two communities. The only green space is left. And as Simon's pointed out, if we allow this to go through, it will be the end of all of the green spaces that separate the two communities. The lane regularly floods. I'm sure most of you drive down the lane. You'll see that 50% of the time it's flooded, and when it's not flooded, it's frozen, which has already pulled the tarmac off and has never actually been replaced and is full of potholes. And this will only get worse. As we've seen happen all over the Dales, so this isn't speculation. The traffic is already appalling, and unfortunately most of you have heard me say all this before, but we've done traffic surveys now for 6 years, and the number of cars that go down that road has gone from 230 an hour 6 years ago to 400 an hour now, and we catch about 6 speeders each time we do a speed watch. Any development on the lane, and we've already had one agreed a couple of months ago, we'll add, let's say, more than 100 cars every single day going in and out and onto the lane. You'll all know the difficulty. 40 miles an hour on the A6, come round the corner, carry on doing 40 miles an hour. That goes past the entrance to the Darley House estate, the entrance to the Hourigan application development, and probably the entrance to this application. Our lane is old and narrow and winding with no footpaths on some sides. And so the couple who live near me, we've got macular degeneration, will no longer walk on the road. We have to watch the school children go backwards and forwards in order to stay on the pavement to get to school. We watch lorries and tractors mount the pavement all the time. In fact, yesterday I was stood on my pavement, my bit of pavement, and a tractor pulled up on it and shouted at me for standing on what I consider to be my bit of the pavement. I really challenge councillors to go and stand on Old Hackney Lane at 8:30 in the morning and watch the woman who walks down with a baby and a toddler and a child to take her child to school, which is at the other end of the lane. She crosses the road, she has to walk in the road, and she's doing that because she wants to show her kids that she can walk to school, they don't have to go in a car. This is about fresh air and teaching your kids all the things that we want our kids to know. In the end, what she'll do is decide it's easier to go in the car and add another car to the road. We urge you not to agree this new development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. We now have the agent to speak in favour of the application, Stephen Jones. Stephen, we give you 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair and members of committee, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity of speaking to you. My name is Stephen Jones. I've been involved in house building in Derbyshire for most of my working life. In fact, the first new homes that I built were in Matlock over 40 years ago. Together with my son, I founded Stancliffe Homes with the objective of building high quality, attractive, well-designed homes, irrespective of size and tenure, that are built to an industry-leading standard. The entire team at Stancliffe Homes work hard to achieve that objective and deliver homes and communities that we can be proud of. Following the withdrawal last year of our earlier planning application to develop this site, we've endeavoured to work positively with your planning officers and other stakeholders to design a scheme which addressed their previous concerns. Our first meeting was with your Head of Development Control, and the guidance we received has helped form the proposal in front of you today. Stancliffe Homes seeks to build developments that meet a wide range of housing needs. Our proposal for Old Hackney Lane is no exception, and if approved, we will deliver homes ranging in size from 1 to 5 bedrooms, which will create a healthy and diverse community. We take our responsibilities to deliver affordable housing very seriously, and we've agreed a mix of the homes with your housing needs officer to meet your authority's policy standard of 30%. Furthermore, Stancliffe Homes has always incorporated a number of bungalows on our schemes, and the proposal before you includes 14 2- and 3-bedroom bungalows, which is just over a third of the total of new homes proposed. Our experience is that single-storey housing is vastly undersupplied, and set against the background of an ageing population in the district and nationally, this should be seen as a key benefit of this development. We also believe that having a mix of bungalows, starter homes and family homes develops a more balanced community. We understand that environmental considerations are of utmost importance to Derbyshire Dales District Council and to many of you around the table this evening. Stancliffe Homes fully shares this value and is also very focused on the environmental impact of what we do. The proposal before you includes swales to filter surface water runoff prior to attenuation, and we look carefully at our designs to incorporate changes which reduce the environmental impact and energy demands from our homes. Consequently, all the proposed homes before you will achieve the highest possible EPC A rating. They will include photovoltaic panels set within the roofs, along with storage batteries and EV charging points, and they will all be heated by air source heat pumps. I'm delighted that the scheme also meets the 10% biodiversity net gain requirement for new development. In addition, I can confirm that all the walls will be built in coursed natural stone and not incorporate brick or render on some elevations, as may be seen on some developments. I understand that on a recent visit to our current development in Tansley, one of your planning officers was highly complimentary of the standard of workmanship on the development and commented to our site manager that it looked exactly as she imagined it would be. I care passionately about what we do, so I was very pleased to hear this, since I believe that attention to detail and delivery is vital to achieve success. Should you be minded to approve this application before you this evening, I can assure you that we will deliver it exactly as it is designed and that we will be on site as quickly as possible. And finally, whilst I appreciate this is not a planning consideration for you, Stancliffe Homes as an SME house builder does not have a long land bank, as the volume house builders have, but relies on securing approvals for a range of sites to maintain employment for our workforce. This is a major challenge for us, and as current developments near a close, I am regularly asked where the next job is, which is proving in a number of cases very difficult to answer. The proposal before you today was submitted to your authority very nearly 12 months ago and is hugely important to Stancliffe Homes. If approved, it will maintain an employment for approximately 2 years for a significant number of our employers and will allow our company to plan ahead with much greater confidence. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this committee, and I respectfully request that you support our application this evening in line with your planning officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Stephen. Before officers introduce this application, you'll see on the papers in front of you we've some further detail received by way of officer update. So just take 3 or 4 minutes to read through those, please. It's paragraphs 5.2 on the papers. Right, I'm going to ask Sean Robson, our development manager, to introduce the application. Sean, perhaps you could, when you're showing us the plans, you could explain how, in your opinion, the application still maintains the important countryside separation between the various settlements in this part of the district. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll pick up on that point, but if I can just draw members' attention to the screen. So this application is for the erection of 37 residential dwellings. It's a resubmission, as mentioned already, of an earlier application which was withdrawn for 41 dwellings. The slide in front of you now just illustrates the site in purple. So effectively the site itself consists of, or constitutes, 2.03 hectares of land bound by stone walls to the frontage, with a significant slope rising from the northeast, both immediately adjacent to Old Hackney Lane and the rear of the existing properties, Farm Cottages and Oakstone Farm. The Darleydale footpath 46 abuts the southern eastern boundary of the site. The surrounding area is characterised by farmhouses and barns adjacent to the road frontage with open farmland. As mentioned, the land does rise significantly. It's approximately 10.4 metres from the road boundary to the northeast boundary of the site, with fields behind. It's worth drawing members' attention just to, on this slide, the area to the top left of the screen that basically abuts the actual application site and the built form. Members will recall that that was an application that was recently appealed by the appellant. That was for 27 dwellings, and that was actually allowed by the Planning Inspectorate on the 9th of September of this year. So this is the application site marked in red, and this is the proposed layout of the actual application site. The site itself, the proposal will incorporate the provision of, when the application originally came in, it then was subject to a further amendment on the back of the comments from the housing officer in terms of the housing mix. So the proposal that's in front of you this evening makes up a mix of the following properties. Market dwellings, there's 1 2-bed, 12 3-bed properties, 9 4-bed properties, and 4 5-bed properties, equating to 26 dwellings. And in terms of the affordable provision, there's 1 4-bed property, 3 2-bed properties, 3 2-bed properties and 4 3-bed properties. That's totaling 11 dwellings. Now the application site, as said, is 2.03 hectares. And that's been mentioned already. The application site itself is effectively in 2 portions, or there's no definitive line between the two. Effectively, you've got 1.6 hectares, which encompasses land within what is the defined development limit and part of an allocation in the local plan, that's policy HC2, with the remaining 1.25 hectares, that's 61% of the site, outside of the allocation, and therefore constitutes open countryside.
So just to interrupt you there, Sean, could you just indicate which of those areas on that plan, which of those 2 areas, which is within the settlement boundary, which isn't on the layout plan?
Yes, so effectively, it's a little above where I was looking at the plan now, you've got the first cul-de-sac in the corner that comes off on the bend, and you've got the second cul-de-sac further down. It's between those 2 points, effectively where there's a line across, you can just almost see a planted line that runs across between those 2 cul-de-sac properties that front onto the cul-de-sac on the bend, and those that front onto the cul-de-sac further down the site. That's approximately where that line is. Unfortunately, I don't have that slide to show members definitively where it is, but effectively 61% of it is outside of the Tier 1 settlement that the settlement is. So 61% of the site is classified as open countryside, with the northwestern boundary being adjacent to the allocation, as mentioned, HC2. Policy S4 states that development on non-allocated sites on the edge of development settlement boundaries of first-tier settlements, in circumstances where there is no 5-year housing supply, may be acceptable, subject to consideration against other policies of the local plan. So I know what was mentioned a little bit earlier about the effectively 5-year housing supply is, for want of a better word, carte blanche. That's not the case at all. It has to be weighed in the balance with everything else, hence the tilted balance. But it is a consideration, the 5-year housing supply. But it doesn't dismiss all other policies that need to be considered and weighed in the round. So therefore, there is a principle for the development on this site as it joins a Tier 1 settlement of Matlock boundary, and therefore paragraph 11D of the MPPF is engaged. It's worth noting in terms of this 5-year housing supply, as mentioned in the earlier presentation, the current Council's annual monitoring report indicates that the Council currently has a 3.49 years worth of housing supply. Therefore, in principle, residential development is acceptable on this site, with substantial weight afforded to increasing the housing supply. However, as said, this must be weighed against the detailed assessment against other policies in the local plan, and together with national design guidance and that criteria. And if I can just move on to the character of the area, there are views from the site, from the length of the public footpath, albeit limited, footpath 46 that runs to the east elevation of the eastern boundary of the site, and views from the site from Hackney Road to the north, and views from Old Hackney Lane. The proposed 12-metre landscape buffer will provide some mitigation of the landscape impacts from the higher land to the north of Hackney Lane. However, whilst the proposed development would impact upon the open character of the landscape, it is very localised in context, or is considered to be very localised in context. The impact is mitigated by the retention of existing landscape features and additional planting as part of the proposed soft landscaping scheme were the proposal to be approved. It is acknowledged that the development would contribute to some extent to the coalescence between the settlements of Matlock and Lower Hackney. However, as mentioned and picked up by the speaker on this evening, there is some area that's still landing on the sloping farmland adjacent to the site to the north and southwest, which will continue to provide some separation. So officers consider, whilst the development is being developed with, or is proposed to be developed within that area, there is still sufficient separation or elements that would still maintain or not create coalescence between those settlements. Officers consider that the design of the proposed development would reflect the character and the surrounding built form and would not significantly impact on the character and appearance of the area. Now, if I can just draw members' attention to the slides, I'm just going to go through the proposed house types on the site. So this is one of the bungalows that's been proposed on the site, one of the proposed properties. Again, a different design, but proposed properties, and as mentioned by the applicant, that the finishing will be stone and appropriate tiles. Another one of the properties on the site, and finally another bungalow, another dwelling, and one of the large properties on the site. Again, a slightly smaller property. There are the semis, and finally one of the bungalows one of the further bungalows on the site. This is the final bungalow. Conditions are recommended to require the submission of material samples. Despite obviously what's been mentioned here this evening, it's quite clear that the appropriate materials have to be conditioned to ensure that development does reflect the vernacular. The proposal is considered to be in accordance with policies S3, PD1, PD5 of the local plan, and policies MP1, MP7, MP11 and MP17 of the neighbourhood plan. And it's just worthwhile drawing members' attention to the update in the papers that you've read this evening. It's worth noting that there are no outstanding consultee objections or concerns. There have been numerous, for want of a better word, reiterations going back from the LLFA and other consultees within the report, and that's reflected within the officer report. Therefore, turning finally to the planning balance, in terms of the allocated part of the site, it is considered, that's the part was in the development limit and part of the policy H2. The development proposed makes an effective use and efficient use of land. The development plan makes provision for new housing development on edge of Tier 1 settlements in circumstances where the District Council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply. It's also worthwhile noting that the written ministerial statement, building the homes we need, which was made on the 30th of July this year, and the tilted balance must be applied in this case, so it's considered they must be applied in this case. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval as per the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. We now move to questions from members of the committee, and Councillor Hughes, you were first in line.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sean, for a good report. PD10. You don't seem to evaluate PD10, evaluate the application against PD10 in the report. And I mean, this comes out of a strategic objective S7, so which is, I mean, quite important in the local plan.
Through you, Chair. I mean, obviously that point is picked up as part of the addendum. Obviously, you can see from the actual extract from the local plan the existence of where PD10 is, and this site actually unfortunately falls outside of that allocation.
Okay. Riparian responsibilities for watercourses. So we've got effectively two watercourses from this site. We've got one that comes off from above the site, is captured by a pond, and is passed through the site and goes underneath the Whitworth Hospital and under Bowden Close. And my understanding is that riparian rights and duties apply at each stage. So we don't know who the owner of the culvert under the Whitworth is. It's probably the Whitworths. And under Bowden Close, it'll probably be the owners of the properties under Bowden Close. And my understanding is that if an upstream riparian owner has responsibilities to downstream riparian owners and has a duty to consult them, which has that happened in this case? And if so, the duty to consult if they change the nature of the watercourse, which is happening in this case. Have they consulted with the Whitworth Hospital or the owners of Bowden Close?
Through you, Chair. You're testing me now, Councillor, in terms of riparian rights. I mean,
No, I've been researching this.
Yes. I mean, my understanding of it is very similar to what you mentioned about in terms of if a property sits or curtilage sits, then that's my understanding is where it falls. In terms of the consultation needs to be carried out, I have no information to suggest that has happened. However, I would have to seek advice or ask exactly what that provision is. I mean, as to whether or not it's something that we could consider as part of the proposal, or whether or not. I mean, I don't wish to move it on or take anywhere away from that actual requirement, but it may well be a civil matter between those various owners or people that have the right to discharge into that. I am aware that a lot of properties do have the right, very much like the general sewer system, to connect.
Yeah.
It's just when it comes to discharging, when that right needs to be agreed and or signed up. But as I say, I don't have any information to say that's happened. But again, I would have to seek legal advice as to exactly what the requirement would be for that, and whether or not it would fall under the planning remit of that separate legislation.
Well, I think it comes under the LLFA again, unfortunately, because they may have to, should be telling the owners of the riparian rights lower down what their
Question, David.
Sorry, yeah. That probably is it, really. I'm just worried about those riparian rights and responsibilities. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
If you wish to carry on for another half hour, colleagues, we need another proposal. Councillor Shelley, Councillor Dobbs, all those in favour? Enthusiastically carried. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Part of my first question has been answered, what David's asked. But just to add on to that, the pond, one of the speakers mentioned about the pond, if it was taken away, there could be flooding of the hospital. But is this correct?
I mean, in short, I can't answer that, Councillor. I mean, obviously, a lot of fields, agricultural fields, have ponds. Some ponds have been filled in the past. I'm not saying it's happened here, but it does happen. I mean, certainly the information that's been submitted in support of the application has been assessed by the LLFA. And obviously, I mean, you've probably seen, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm quite surprised when I first read the report. There was some points that were picked up by the LLFA that have been ratified. And then it's been drawn through as to them not objecting, subject to conditions. But you can see whether there's that clear picture, which is obviously something that certainly may not have happened on a number of occasions before. But that's within the reports. I think it's pages 54 and 55, I believe. Sorry, no, that's incorrect. Sorry, my apologies. That's on page 56 and 57.
Yeah, well, it was.
So it starts at the bottom of page 56, if your number is the same as mine, and then it basically, sorry, that's at the top of page 56 and pulls through most of 56 and the top of 57, just in terms of the initial comments. Then further information was sought, further comments, and then final comments.
Yeah, thank you. Just a second question. At the north of the site, there's a truly separation from the other properties above, like it's not joining onto Matlock in any way.
I mean, basically, the layout that's been shown there, Councillor, is what we're asking members to consider.
It's like a separation, isn't it, at the top?
I mean, it's considered in the report that there's still elements that facilitate that.
Yeah.
But obviously that needs to be weighed in the round. I mean, the officers have put their suggestion forward that it's not an issue. Obviously, members may well agree or disagree with that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. This could be a very naive question with a very short answer. I understood that if you had flood zones 2 and above in a development and you want to build houses where there is currently a flood zone, there'd have to be a sequential test. Now, there is, in the mapping of the flood risk assessment, flood zone 2 shown on this site. So I know they're going to fill the pond in, and that was the thing where they were going to say that it was going to flood. But can you do that? Can you avoid the sequential test by saying, oh, it's flooding here, I'll fill it in with gravel or whatever, and so there's no problem? Is that what they've done?
I mean, I've certainly, not speaking to this proposal, I've certainly seen similar activities where they've alleviated and taken it effectively out of that. And if it's only a small portion of the site, that the EA haven't objected to it or raised issue with it, or if it's beneath a certain threshold of numbers, the EA haven't objected to it. I'm not suggesting that's happened in this case, Councillor, but I'm certainly aware of that.
Thank you. Second one, and that is, I understood that the Local Flood Authority preferred open SUDs, basically. Underground tanks was not favoured, but we have them here. Is that your understanding?
My understanding, I've seen a number of different responses from the LFA. I mean, some a little bit shorter than this, some well, not many longer than this. I mean, from my discussions with them, they look at all the proposals within the SUD arsenal, as it were, in terms of mitigating against surface water. But I think all I can say on this one, Councillor, not wishing to dodge the actual question, is the fact that they haven't objected to it and they've advised conditions.
Councillor Shelley, Roger.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm interested in paragraph 716 and 717 of your report, which refers to the evidence from the strategic land housing assessment, which was done very recently, in fact. Would you not agree that there's a huge disparity between the rather damning indictment of the proposal to build on the site in those two paragraphs and the apparent change, which appears to be very, how can I put it, subjective, in the later paragraphs there? That's my first question. And I think from that, I'm drawing out the fact that throughout all planning issues, particularly ones of this nature, there is a degree of subjectivity. And I touch on the word you used earlier when you said that the tilted balance must be applied. Okay, whilst it must be applied, there are certain considerations within that that may be respected. So we're talking about linguistics here, but I'm particularly interested in that apparent change from those earlier paragraphs. If you could comment on that, please.
Yes, sorry, through you, Chair. To come back on that point, I mean, yes, obviously the strategic housing land availability assessment, I mean, obviously it is not ideal. It's not actually favourable this site at all. But I think what's quite clear in the report, that is weighed, and as mentioned already, I don't want to come back to tilted balance, but it's been weighed in the balance. It's not the same but as officers would any particular report that we ask members to consider, weigh everything in the balance. And I think in this particular instance, given where we unfortunately in an unenviable position we are in terms of housing numbers, and the fact it's on a peripheral edge of a tier 1 settlement, and the policy does allow for elements or parts of it to project or join those settlements, that's what's led to the on balance recommendation to approve. I keep saying on balance. I know obviously it is a recommendation that it should be approved, but it would always be written, every officer would always write the report on balance, because at the end of the day, members need to weigh everything as well.
We're having to make decisions on balance, I understand, and with serious understanding of the costs if we get things wrong. I'm also interested, though, in your opinion on if we were to reject this, and a number of reasons seem to be coming out which could be framed in that sense. Part of the issue here is that this application is right on the edge of the zone of PD10. There was some confusion there, because when people talk about the coalescence of Matlock and Darleydale, they think it's everything there. It's not. It's a very, very defined area, but it's only just outside that. Those of us who've got long memories will notice, in fact, this plan doesn't show that since this was done in 2017, there has been a development, the Bowden Close one, on the other side of the road there. So I'm not asking you to put yourself in the shoe of a government inspector, but given that there's been a serious erosion of PD10 already, would this not be regarded as filling in another box, which would lead to almost inexorably the elimination of that barrier between the two settlements?
Through you, Chair. I mean, obviously I can't speak for the planning inspectorate. But in this particular case, all I can possibly draw your attention to is as you can see from the slide in front of you, the area that's to the top right, left-hand side of the screen there. That was the development for the 27 units that's recently been approved by the inspectorate. And the element of PD10 was referred to in the inspectors. I haven't got the decision in front of me, but in their decision. And that was pulled through, and it wasn't seen as a issue that the inspector felt was significant to refuse the application based on that element. Therefore, what you've mentioned there about the other development on the other side of the PD10, that development there, it may well be that the inspector would form that opinion again. The fact is that certain elements or certain developments have come forward that have encroached but not projected into that allocation, but then themselves are not considered to erode that allocation, which I believe is what the inspector concluded on the 27 dwellings. Sorry, I have skated around the issue. Again, I can't put myself in the shoes of the inspector, but I think it would be, there may be other considerations whether this is to go to appeal or public inquiry, and the inspector may well weigh others in consideration, but I don't think if it was solely PD10, I don't think that would be sufficient to sway a inspector's mind. That's only my personal opinion. That's not to say members are fixated down that route or should not consider that in their deliberation, but it's just based on what I can see in front of me.
Councillor Sue Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. The first one refers to policy HC11. Am I correct, Sean, that there are a larger proportion of 4-bedroom homes within this proposal than is required within HC11? And how would we justify that in planning terms?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. Yes, the provision is above where the starting point would be, but I think what is quite clear what needs to be quite made clear on this particular application is this requirement, this mix, was a direct steer and requirement from speaking to our housing officer. So when we looked at the policy, obviously there's 30% being delivered, albeit 29.73, I think it is, on site, and there's an off-site contribution of 0.1% of 29.73% is being allocated on the site, with the shortfall 0.1 for contribution where members to support the application. So they will be achieving the 30%. So fully policy compliant on that. But in terms of the mix, that has come directly from, and the tenure, proposed tenure, that has directly come from discussions with the housing officer.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, the second question is about highways. I think those of us who regularly used Old Hackney Lane to go out onto the A6, to go north onto the A6, know that it's often, or more often than not, it's very difficult and sometimes downright dangerous to turn right onto the A6. So my question is, do we know why Derbyshire County Council, as the Highway Authority, have not suggested any kind of mitigation to sort this out? And if not, I'm just wondering why they weren't asked for some mitigation, and that would presumably be at the developer's expense.
Yes, through you, Chair, to come back on that, on Councillor Burford. I mean, I can't answer on behalf of the Highway Authority in terms of how they assessed it or what their deliberation was in terms of looking at certain routes and so forth. However, they haven't objected to it. They've requested conditions where ourselves minded to approve it. In terms of the mitigation, I mean, I have seen schemes before where highways have asked for mitigation or contributions to a mitigation. And unfortunately, that hasn't come forward in this particular case. Therefore, I can only assume that or certain thresholds or requirements weren't breached or met in this particular instance. But again, I'm speaking without that knowledge as a highway officer.
Again, it's a pity that they're never here to answer any questions. But the third question is something that I picked up on the planning portal, which suggested that this development does not provide for sewage discharge, and I'm quoting, via main sewers for all the 37 houses. Is that true?
I'm sorry, just one moment, Chair. Yes, through you, Chair. Councillor Burford, that was my understanding it was going to the main sewer, but I'm prepared to be corrected, but that was my understanding it was, from my reading of it.
Councillor Shelley, you want to come back?
Yeah, it's actually on that point. I'm indebted to some of the local residents for drawing it to my attention in their very detailed submission again. And it is to do with, there's a quote from, I believe it's the flood risk assessment. The foul sewers can accommodate gravity foul flows from 56 dwellings. But if that's in relation to the entirety of this site and the one next door. And if you add those together, that comes to 64. I don't know whether that point has actually been addressed at all.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I mean, Severn Trent haven't actually come back and objected to it. I mean, obviously, I know the allocation indicates for the full allocation for the amount of housing. They have been consulted on it, but again, they haven't come back, I'm afraid.
I think it's a serious evidence gap.
Could I ask myself one question of detail, Sean, please, in relation to your proposed condition 16? This relates to certain aspects of highway construction. Does that apply to the internal roads and footpaths?
Yes, that plan relates to the site in its entirety, Councillor.
Sorry. So is that are you saying it's...
So yes, it does.
Yes, so that there is a condition which requires all roads and footpaths to be completed as per drawings prior to first occupation within the site.
Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, okay. Right, if there are no further questions, we're moving into debate. Please, we have a recommendation from our officers to approve the application. I think one of the key considerations for us is to look at the reasons why part of the site was excluded from as a housing site in the first instance back in 2017, and I think there were clear reasons why it was, and whether there's sufficient evidence now before us to determine that the separation between settlement is still adequately maintained. But as I said, we have a recommendation before us to approve, and I need a proposal from the chair, please, to either go along with that or an alternative.
Thank you,
Councillor Shelley.
Can I move objection, please, on a number of different grounds, which I can come on to, but the principal one is the failure to maintain the separation between the conurbations of Darley-Dale and Matlock.
Does that find a seconder?
Chair, are you actually moving refusal?
Yes.
I'm happy, therefore, to second that, and I'm doing it for a variety of reasons. First of all, the actual layout and design and detail is of a good standard. It's just the wrong location. I totally support the views that have been expressed in the report from Darley-Dale Town Council and residents tonight. I can only speak as a councillor from the heart, and there seems to be like a sanitisation of our roles, and I would be failing myself because ultimately this is part of the erosion. It's one of the last green breathing spaces, from my point of view as a ward member, that is very precious to Darley-Dale. Now, it's only last week, residents will tell you, half the carriageway of the A6 below Old Hackney Road was underwater yet again. The county can't even seem to sort out what is a regular occurrence. It's basic stuff. Members, read what County Councillor Susan Hobson had to say on page 44. She is scathing. You know, there seems to me to be a united front. We elect town councillors. We elect ward members. We've got a county councillor, and we're all saying we're not comfortable with development on what should be a greenfield protected site. Now, you can perhaps turn around to me as officer and say, oh, well, Councillor Burton, they aren't planning reasons. But to be honest, I'm not prepared to sit around this table and compromise what for me is my community and what makes Darley-Dale. Richard Llewellyn, didn't he, wrote the book How Green Is My Valley, and Darley-Dale has had its share of development. So I move and second refusal.
Right, well, there are planning reasons. It's policy S4, David, actually. This is a bit of a deja vu here. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes now to allow Councillor Shelley and Councillor Burton to discuss with Sean Robson whether Sean feels that the proposed reasons for refusal are robust enough.
Yes, Chair. So we would need a form of wording, because I'll just draw attention back to the RTPI Professional Code of Conduct. We cannot advise you on that as we had before.
Would you three like to get together for 10 minutes, please, and have a discussion around that? Half an hour if we need that, please. Councillor Dobbs, seconder, please. Councillor Boynton. All those in favour, please show. Right. We need to agree another half hour. Does anyone? All except Councillor Walker, who doesn't want to stay any longer. Right, that's carried. So, right. Councillor Shelley, do you want to let us know where you got to?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So we have a form of words now, which is that we recommend refusal of the application on the grounds that it encroaches beyond the existing allocation into the open countryside to the detriment of the surrounding area and landscape, particularly citing policies S4, PD5, and supported by policy PD8, where there are serious concerns about the perceived flooding risk from surface water containment.
Okay, I should have mentioned this before. You don't feel additional reason relating to the character of the settlements being adversely affected would be appropriate. Councillor Burton, do you like to endorse that?
Absolutely. And in terms of the character, I think the word needs to be used perceived, doesn't it? Yeah. But thank you, Chair, for that.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, can I just add a bit of supporting evidence to that? And because one thing that concerns me is and one of the residents brought this up, is the number of means of access from the site to the open countryside above the site. And I feel that is a real concern on this development and the layout of the development. I know that we can't consider future planning applications, but it suggests that this isn't the only one. I don't know how we phrase that. Perhaps it's just that the layout of the development is not one that is conducive to maintaining the land quality of the landscape.
Need to ask Sean Robson to just comment on those, both my and your suggestions, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you. In terms of the unacceptable perceived impact on the character of the settlement and built form, I mean, that's something that, again, can be rolled in or rolls off the back of policy S for part of PD5 as well. In terms of the proposed layout and what may happen, I would suggest we shouldn't use that. Thank you.
Any further contributions, please, colleagues? Councillor Suberfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I do think this is a difficult one. First of all, could I say that I do know that Stancliffe Homes do have an excellent reputation, so I haven't got a problem with that. The problem is these would be in the wrong place, and I say that because I think there are some very crucial issues that we need to just expand on. I think we need to bear in mind that, and I was looking at the report, but 61% of this site is outside the site allocated in the local plan. So that means that 61% of it is in countryside, basically. And, you know, how far do we carry on eroding our countryside, our green fields? Now, I think if we do refuse this application, I think it will help to maintain this separation between these communities of Matlock, Darley-Dale and Hackney, which I think was defined, as I understand, in SHLA 292, if I'm right, Sean. I would also like to just bring up again, I seem to be doing this at every meeting, my disappointment with Derbyshire County Council highways. Old Hackney Lane is basically a country lane. It is a country lane. There are parts of it where you go around some of the bends and it's quite dangerous. You know, the fear is that you have a head-on collision every time you go around these bends. Some of the pavement is hardly wide enough for a pedestrian, never mind somebody with a wheelchair or certainly a double pushchair. And to sort of say, for them to say, and I'm quoting, that the proposal will have a negligible effect on the highway, I'm just gobsmacked by that, to be honest.
Thank you. Any further contributions? Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. One of the regrets, I think, for me is one of the reasons why the adjacent site and part of this site were previously refused permission was the fact that there was a more effective use of those sites. So if you accept that at least part of this was in the local plan and a decision was made, admittedly an unpopular one in some quarters, was made back then, that we've kind of been snookered on that by part of it having been agreed, and now we have this one adjacent to it, and I don't think it is the best solution that was possible. Unfortunately, we can't undo one of those decisions. It's already been made for us, but I believe that probably if we want to maintain this green buffer between these communities, refusing this is probably the best way to go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Before I ask Roger to wind up, just give you my views on this. I think officers have been very reasonable in bringing forward their recommendation. That is the judgment. But I think, as the report makes clear, and I think the debate has shown, the interpretation of these policies is very much a matter of balanced judgment. And it may be that the committee will reach has a different view on that balance, and that is entirely legitimate if it can be substantiated. Roger, you want to wind up as mover of the...
Yes, I mean, it's with a heavy heart because I know the risks to this authority if we get this wrong. That's been spelled out many, many times to us. And, I do pay tribute to the designs of these houses. The fact that you've gone to a great deal of effort in terms of the energy credentials of those really strikes a chord with myself, and the fact that there's bungalows in there as well. But as has been said, for us, it's the wrong houses in the wrong places. The local MP talked about in the other application before us tonight about how this was really outside the current approved boundary, and what a boundary is for. This is a boundary which the community is very, very familiar with. And I just show you these two maps which I brought along tonight. One which is the one showing our site, which, alas, for whatever reason, back in 2017, the previous authority but one chose not to put this field into PD10. If you read PD10, we all thought that this was part of PD10 for a little while, which is that separation between Darleydale, Hackney and Matlock. And then I bring you this map, which I'm not going to tell you the date of this one, but it shows exactly the same area. This is actually the application site. There's probably half a dozen houses on this. If you want any evidence at all about how the settlement has been extended, how the green fields here have been eroded, even into things which were supposedly protected by PD10 on the other side of the A6, you only have to compare these. These are almost within a single lifetime.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the vote. Could I have all those in favour of the proposal to refuse on the basis of the grounds stated? All those show, please. And those against refusal? There's 3. And those who wish to abstain? That is one. The application is therefore refused on the grounds stated. So, thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your attention this evening. It's been yet another long meeting. That's the second one this week. I would like to, as this is the last meeting of this calendar year, I would like to thank you all and our officers for your contributions and support during the year. I'm sure I speak on behalf of Councillor Burton and Councillor Burfoot as well. So thank you very much. Hope you have a happy Christmas, a safe, peaceful New Year, and do have a safe journey home.